At my $985,000 housewarming, my sister grabbed my arm. "This house is perfect for my family." Mom added, "Pack your things." I hit play on the TV. When I watched my sister and mother stroll into the welcoming event for my new house, I knew something was about to happen. A home that mirrored every sacrifice, late night, and ounce of effort I put into creating my IT firm. Nonetheless, the knot in my gut tightened and my skin crawled as I recognized the look in their eyes. The exact expression I saw when I was 21, the night my entire life fell apart. Growing up in Boston, our family seemed to be rather average. Dad works in finance, while Mom operates a boutique with 2 girls and a golden retriever named Buddy. However, as the phrase goes, looks may be deceiving. When I was 13, the cracks started to emerge. Dad walked out, and while the divorce was not very dramatic, what followed next set the stage for years of pure family dysfunction. Camille, 4 years my senior, subsequently married Andrew, an investment banker from a wealthy family. Their wedding was magnificent, but Mom spent more than $65,000 she didn't have, claiming that a daughter only gets married once. I was 20, working 2 jobs, attending community college, and just scraping by to buy my bridesmaid outfit. Then came the babies. Lucas, Madeline, and Noah. Camille's entitlement grew with each child, and Mom was always willing to assist them out, even if it cost me. "Your sister has 3 children to feed," Mom would say. "What do you need the additional money for? Books? Couldn't you just utilize the library?" Meanwhile, I was pushing myself to exhaustion. Scholarships were helpful, but without family support. I worked as a barista in the mornings, tutored in the afternoons, and data entry clerk on weekends. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. Dad slipped into obscurity after relocating to Chicago and beginning a new family. Mom made it tough for him to communicate with me by failing to alert me when he phoned or accidentally deleting his messages. But I persevered. While Camille posted stunning family vacation photos, I worked up all night coding and researching. I graduated at the top of my class. Mom attended my high school graduation but departed early since Camille phoned. Lucas had a slight fever. I've never complained. I simply accepted this as my reality and became driven to achieve success on my own terms. I didn't need their approval. What I didn't foresee was how dramatically things would change on my 21st birthday. That night shaped everything that happened afterward, culminating in the battle 11 years later. My 21st birthday happened on a Tuesday. I remember because I was able to take the evening off, which was unusual. I wasn't anticipating a big celebration. Camille and Andrew were expecting their 3rd child and had the whole family's attention. Still, turning 21 seemed significant. I was legally an adult, had finished high school, and had won partial scholarships to 3 institutions. When I got home after tutoring, I found Mom and Camille at the kitchen table, preoccupied in spreadsheets. They hardly glanced up. Leftover lasagna in the refrigerator. "If you're hungry," Mom said, her gaze riveted on the papers. I heated up a dish and joined them, fascinated. "What are you working on?" Mom inquired, looking up. "Just sorting out some financial issues. Camille and Andrew need a bigger house now that Noah is on his way." I nodded, used to similar conversations. But through me. "Why do you have my college suddenly a shutter paperwork?" Camille sighed heavily. "We might as well tell her, Mom." Mom straightened the papers and gave me that familiar look that normally precedes a family sacrifice. "Evelyn, we need to discuss your college plans," my mother informed me, Camille expecting again. "They truly need a 4-bedroom home. Andrew's bonus was not as high as they had anticipated this year, and they are a little strained." I sat patiently, knowing precisely where this was going. "The point is," Camille explains, "we have calculated everything. Even with Andrew's salary and Mom's assistance with the down payment, we are still short." "Short for what?" I queried, even though I was already aware. "We need to use your college fund," Mom explained. "Honestly, it's not like you don't already have scholarships. And community college is completely legitimate. You can transfer to a university later when things are less stressful for the family. My college fund, which Dad had begun before the divorce, and Mom's promised money for my education remained unaffected. I was counting on this cash to fill the gap created by scholarships. "But that is my money," I responded softly. Camille rolled her eyes. "Dad set it aside for my education." "Don't be selfish, Evelyn. We're talking about a house for your niece and nephew. Where should they sleep? Should Noah just live in a closet because you want to attend a prestigious university?" "That's not what I'm saying," I protested. "But I've worked so hard for this. I maintained a 3.9 GPA despite working numerous jobs. These scholarships will not cover everything. You can take out loans like everyone else, Camille shouted. Andrew and I have a mortgage. That is life. Or she might have said, you might live at home and go to community college. That would be a lot more cost-effective. Something inside me moved. A lifetime of compliance and acceptance gave way to utter indignation. No. A single phrase lingered in the air. Mom blinked, anticipating no opposition from me. Excuse me? No, I said more loudly this time. The money is for my studies. Dad. You've laid it aside for me. It's not Camille's house money. Mom's face hardened. Evelyn. This isn't a negotiation. This is what's occurring. Your sister has a family to support. And I have a future to build, I said, my voice shaking. I've earned those scholarships. I worked while keeping flawless grades. Camille chuckled coldly, dismissively. I deserve to use my college fund for college. Oh, please. Assuming you understand anything about genuine responsibility. Try having 3 rushed children before you lecture us on what you deserve. Tears threatened, but I held back. This is not fair, and you know it. Mom got up, scraping her chair. Education is my top priority, I said. That is not incorrect. Well then, Mom responded, folding her arms. If that is your attitude, you have a decision to make. Accept that the money will be used to aid your sister, or pack your bags and embark on your own journey. You're 21 now, after all. An ultimatum hung in the air. Camille grinned, knowing I would back down like I usually did. But something had broken within me. Years of being second best, putting Camille's needs before my own. I stood up softly. I will pack my bags. If I hadn't been so terrified, the surprise on their faces would have been pleasant. Mom definitely did not expect me to choose independence. Do not be so dramatic, Camille mocked. Where would you even go? I didn't answer. I walked into my bedroom and got out my largest bag. I packed my clothes, toiletries, laptop, and important papers methodically. Family photos hung on the walls. They didn't feel like mine anymore. Mom came at my doorway as I zipped the suitcase closed. You're being foolish. Sleep on it. And we will debate it logically in the morning. There is nothing to discuss, I murmured, taken aback by my own calm. You have stated your stance clearly. I'm making mine clear too. I pushed my luggage past her, grabbed my bag from the rack at the front door, and went outside into the darkness. Nobody called after me. Nobody attempted to stop me. That night I slept in my car in the Walmart parking lot, using my work outfit as a pillow. For 3 weeks, I stuck to that regimen, working 4 jobs, sleeping in my car, and bathing at the gym where I had a discounted membership. I told no one. On the 17th day, my computer science instructor, Professor Helen Whitaker, noticed me sleeping in the library. She gently awakened me and asked if everything was okay. Something in her soft eyes shattered my carefully maintained composure, so I told her everything. That evening she brought me to her home and showed me the guest room. It is yours until you figure things out, she stated simply. No one should have to face this alone. Professor Whitaker became more than simply a teacher. She became my mentor's champion and the first one to believe in me wholeheartedly. She helped me secure further scholarships, walked me through financial aid forms, and provided a critical reference for an internship that would ultimately transform my life. Everything that followed the night I was booted out was influenced by that event. It demonstrated that I was entirely alone, yet that chosen family may be more supportive than biological relatives. Most importantly, it proved my own strength, which I was unaware I possessed until I was forced to acknowledge it. With Professor Whitaker's assistance, I was able to get sufficient financial aid scholarships and part-time jobs to attend a local public university rather than my preferred school. It wasn't Boston University, but it did have a solid computer science program, which I loved. My college experience differed significantly from that of my peers. While others partied and joined clubs, I performed a variety of jobs to stay afloat, including waitressing, manning the university IT help desk, and doing freelance web development projects late at night. Sleep became a luxury, and social interactions were non-existent. Despite my rigorous schedule, I kept a perfect GPA. The computer science curriculum went well, and I found myself supporting classmates who were suffering, one of which was Sophia Tran. Sophia, a smart but distracted individual, became my closest friend and ultimately business partner. We were starkly different in various ways. I was methodical. She was impulsive. I excelled at back-end programming. She had a talent for user experience and design. Together, we were ideal. During our junior year, we began discussing creating a money management software for young adults. The bulk of current tools were built for folks who were already financially comfortable, not for people like us who were living paycheck to paycheck. We recognized a gap and were eager to address it. We developed a prototype using resources on campus. We named it Sen, an app that allows users to view their spending, automate their savings, and establish responsible credit. Our professors were impressed, but more importantly, our classmates found it very useful. After college, Sophia and I had to choose between steady corporate positions and pursuing our entrepreneurial goals. The safe choice sounded enticing, especially given my financial situation. However, I recalled Professor Whitaker's comments. Sometimes the riskiest road yields the biggest benefits. To save money, we took a gamble and moved into a small roach-infested flat. We dedicated ourselves completely to Sen. I programmed while eating ramen. Sophia worked on user interfaces until dawn. We attended every networking event, pitch competition, and startup program we could find. 7 months of rejections followed. Investors felt we were too young, inexperienced, or targeted the incorrect demographics. College students do not care about financial planning, one venture entrepreneur commented dismissively. But we persisted. We had a breakthrough when we obtained a small business grant, allowing us to recruit our first employee, a marketing specialist who helped us refine our messaging. We made a modest modification, concentrating on recent graduates with student debt rather than current students. The app gained traction gradually and then dramatically. We were featured on a tech blog. A financial influencer with millions of followers promoted Sen, and our user base grew from thousands to hundreds of thousands. Throughout the procedure, I had occasional ideas of contacting my family. I'd had virtually little interaction since that night. Mom called 4 months after I left, not to apologize, but to let me know that they had spent my college fund on Camille's down payment. Dad texted me from time to check in, but our connection remained distant. Instead, I concentrated on expanding my business and personal life. Years passed in a frenzy of code meetings and ultimate success. Sophia and I moved from our modest accommodation to a respectable workplace. We hired extra developers, customer service representatives, and marketing professionals. Sen expanded into a full financial platform. 6 years after our founding, we got an acquisition offer from one of the country's leading financial technology companies. The sum was overwhelming enough to make Sophia and I rich several times over. We eventually reached an agreement after weeks of talks. I was 31 years old and suddenly wealthy than I had imagined imaginable. The concerned 21-year-old sleeping in her car looked to be a different person. Financial security gave people the freedom to make rational judgments rather than rash ones. I invested the most of my windfall, donated to scholarships for first-generation college students, and ultimately allowed myself to explore creating a real house, rather than just a place to sleep between work shifts. After months of searching, I found it. A magnificent craftsman-style home in an upscale neighborhood. At $985,000, it was a significant investment, but it was well within my budget. The 4-bedroom home has character and charm, with hardwood floors, wide windows, a wraparound porch, and a spacious lawn. It required work, but I saw its promise straight immediately. As I signed the closing paperwork, I thought about the irony. My education fund was spent 11 years ago to assist Camille purchase a larger home. I was now able to purchase a property for around $1 million by my own efforts. During the renovation, I received an unexpected message from my father. He saw the news of Sen's takeover online and wanted to congratulate me. Our conversation was uncomfortable, yet it offered new opportunities. He indicated that he had lost track of me after I left and was too ashamed to look further for me. He got divorced again and returned to Boston. Would I consider meeting for coffee? That coffee encounter was heated yet healing. Dad apologized for being absent during my difficult years. He admitted he was aware of the college fund situation but felt unable to act. I did not forgive him immediately away, but I admired his candor. We agreed to work on gradually re-establishing our relationship. During our conversation, he confessed that Camille and Andrew were having financial issues again. Apparently they had to downsize once Andrew's firm was reorganized. Mom continued to support them in every way she could. "They don't know about your success," Dad said. "I have not told them." I nodded, unsure how I felt about it. Part of me wanted them to know how successful I was despite their lack of support. Another half wanted that my successes be kept private. As my house renovations neared completion, I organized a housewarming party. After much thinking, I added my family to the guest list. Sophia feared that I was setting myself up for disappointment. But I thought it was time to close that chapter of my life, one way or another. I sent official invites to Dad, Mom, Camille, and Andrew. Dad responded quickly with acceptance. Mom called, surprised yet pleased. Camille texted, "I look forward to seeing how you're doing. We will be there." The stage was set for a reunion. I never anticipated something so dramatic. The morning of my housewarming celebration was bright and beautiful. Despite staying up late to finish the house, I got up early. Each room was excellent. The living room with its comfortable sectional and built-in bookshelves, the gourmet kitchen with marble countertops and professional-grade appliances, the dining room that can seat up to 10 people, and 4 beautifully appointed bedrooms upstairs, including a master suite with a balcony that overlooks the backyard. Sophia came about 10:30, filled with champagne and decorations. "Are you certain you want to go through with this?" she queried while arranging flowers. "It is not too late to uninvite them." "I need closure," I responded, my stomach twisting at the thought of seeing my mother and sister again. "Besides, these are just 3 out of 28 visitors. If things become difficult, we will have plenty of buffers." The caterers arrived at lunchtime and set up stations on the first floor. By 3:30, everything was ready. Food, beverages, music, and my nerves were frazzled. My colleagues in technology arrived first, followed by neighbors. Professor Helen Whitaker arrived with her husband, embraced me heartily and whispered her pride. Friends from college, industry acquaintances, and my financial advisor round out the early visitors. At 5 o'clock the doorbell rang again. I opened it to see my father standing awkwardly on the porch with a present bag. "Dad," I said, the words still sounding strange. "Evelyn," he continued, glancing at the home behind me. "This is impressive." I invited him in, gave him a brief tour, and introduced him to several of our visitors. He seemed genuinely pleased to see how well I was doing, albeit a bit out of place among the affluent professionals that filled my house. "Your mother and sister should be here soon," he stated. "They were going to get together." I nodded and refilled my water glass to hide my concern. "So, how are they?" Dad hesitated. "Managing Andrew's work position has been difficult for them. They sold their home last year and moved into a townhouse. Your mother, Elaine, is very helpful with the kids." Before I could respond, Sophia arrived at my elbow. "More guests are arriving," she added. "Including, I believe, your mother and sister." I took a deep breath and approached the front door. There they stood, Elaine, scarcely aged after 11 years, and Camille, still attractive but with stress lines around her eyes. Behind them stood Andrew, who seemed much older and more weathered than I recalled, and their 3 children, Lucas, a teenager, Madeline, a preteen, and Noah, approximately 10 years old. "Evelyn," Mom said, her tone hesitant. "Thank you for inviting us." "Welcome," I responded, stepping back to allow them in. "Please come in." The children lingered back meekly, clearly told to be on their best behavior. I smiled at them. I hardly knew these nieces and nephews. "There is a game room upstairs if you get bored," I informed them. "Second door on the right." This broke the ice a little. Lucas asked whether I had a game system, and once I responded yes, the kids headed upstairs. After a short thank you, Andrew commented, "Beautiful home." He looked about with professional curiosity. "The architectural details are impressive." "Thank you," I said. "The renovation took 7 months, but it was worth it." Camille lifted her eyes. "You must have had quite a team working on it." "I did," I said without more elaboration. "Would you want a tour?" As I led them around the home, Camille's manner became more calculating. She ran her fingers over the marble surfaces, looked into closets, and remarked on the wonderful play area in the rear. Mom followed more quietly, occasionally commenting on the decor or inquiring about a detail. "This must have been quite an investment," she eventually said as we walked inside the main bedroom. "It was," I said, "but I have been fortunate in my career." "What exactly are you doing right now?" Camille asked, sitting uninvited on the side of my bed. Dad mentioned something about an app. I told them a truncated version of my success story, and their expressions changed from polite inquiry to surprise. "Did you sell your firm for millions?" Camille inquired, her voice louder than normal. "We did," I answered. The timing was right. The tour moved downstairs where more guests had arrived. I presented my family to Sophia, Professor Helen Whitaker, and colleagues and friends who were familiar with my story. Throughout the introductions I noticed Mom and Camille gathering in corners, speaking furiously. Andrew looked detached from their conversations, instead chatting with my tech industry contacts. 1 hour into the party, I clinked my glass to draw everyone's attention. "Thank you for coming to celebrate this new chapter with me. This house signifies more than simply a place to live. It is a milestone that I previously thought was unreachable. I am grateful to everyone who helped me along the road." As I ended my brief remark, Camille approached. As Evelyn's sister, I would like to say something too. Her voice had the confident tone I remembered from childhood, the sound that usually preceded her achieving precisely what she wanted. Family is everything, she said, placing her palm on my arm. And seeing Evelyn's beautiful home today has made me realize how perfect this would be for our family. The visitors exchanged perplexing whispers. What Camille means, Mom said quietly, is that we are very proud of Evelyn for creating a space where family can gather. No, Camille exclaimed, tightening her grip on my arm. I mean, this house would be ideal for my family. With Andrew's career position and the kids requiring decent schools, we've been hunting for just this type of house in exactly this neighborhood. The room became quiet. Even the caterer had stopped moving. Camille, Andrew said, his face burning. This is not the time or place. It is exactly the right time, she informed us. Evelyn has always wanted to aid her family. She is unmarried, without children, and certainly doing well financially. This 4-bedroom house is wasted on one person when we have 3 growing children who need space and stability. Mom gave a sympathetic nod. I stood motionless, not believing what I was hearing. After 11 years of no communication since seizing my college fund, they were now requesting, nay expecting, that I give them my home. Evelyn, Mom said, her voice taking on that authoritative tone I knew all too well. You need to gather your belongings and locate a smaller place. A downtown condo would be much more suitable for your lifestyle, and it would mean the world to your sister's family. Camille was already pacing the living room, pointing out the changes they intended to make. Lucas could have the bedroom with the bay window. Madeline would love the purple room, and Noah would have plenty of room for his toys in the smallest bedroom. Mom joined in. After everything Camille has gone through, she deserves this. It is the least you could do as her sister. The room had become completely silent. My visitors looked at us with terrified fascination. Sophia rushed to my side, offering support but remaining silent. I took a deep breath, feeling strangely calm despite the absurd scene that was unfolding. I have something to show you, I said quietly as I collected my phone. I used the smart home system to connect my phone to the large television in the main room. With a few touches, I opened a document and projected it on the screen. What is this? Camille inquired anxiously. This, I explained, is a restraining order I filed 11 years ago after you kicked me out on my 21st birthday. The room fell silent as the legal document appeared on the screen. Even the caterer remained motionless, trays in hand. What are you talking about? Mom's voice broke the silence, full of confusion and outrage. We've never kicked you out. You chose to leave. I maintained a steady voice, years of practice paying off. You issued an ultimatum on my 21st birthday. Accept that my college funds would go toward Camille's down payment or pack my bags. I packed my bags. You didn't stop me. That was a disagreement, not an eviction, Camille snorted, her eyes fixed on the document. You are being dramatic. I slept in my car for 3 weeks, I simply explained. In February, in Boston. A murmur spread among the assembled guests. Dad stepped forward, his face pale. I didn't realize it was that bad, he said gently. You never told me. Would it have mattered? I inquired. He made no response to that. I swiped to the next document in my phone. This is more interesting, however. This is why I filed the restraining order. The screen now showed credit reports and loan applications in my name, all from shortly after I left the house. What is this? Andrew inquired, leaning closer to the screen, his financial background assisting him in understanding what he was witnessing before the others. After I left, someone opened 4 credit cards and took out a personal loan in my name, I told the officer. They had my social security number, birth certificate, and enough personal information to answer security questions. The total debt was slightly more than $52,000. Mom's face turned white. Camille became very interested in her wine glass. Fortunately, I added, the detective who assisted me was thorough. Camille used her credit cards at various stores. The loan funds were deposited in an account, which then transferred the exact amount to your joint checking account, Andrew. Andrew carefully turned to face his wife. You told me that money was from your mother, a gift to help with the down payment. It was, says Camille. Mom helped arrange it by committing identity theft against your own daughter. Professor Helen Whitaker interrupted, her intellectual demeanor giving way to protective rage. That is a felony, in case you were not aware. I am sure there has been some mix-up, my mother said. This is the police report I filed, I explained, displaying another document. I had sufficient evidence to file charges for identity theft and fraud. The detective was especially interested in this loan application. I concentrated on a signature where someone attempted to imitate my signature but misspelled my middle name. Camille's hand shook so violently that she had to set down her wine glass. "If you filed charges, why weren't we arrested?" she inquired, her voice lacking conviction. "Because I did not pursue it," I replied simply. "I was 21, terrified, but you were still my family, so I struck a deal with the detective. I would pay off the fraudulent debts myself if they documented everything but refrained from prosecuting." I swiped to another document. "This is proof of payment. Every penny of that $52,000, plus interest, was paid by me over 4 years while I was putting myself through college, working 4 jobs, sleeping 5 hours a night, and eating ramen noodles to survive while paying off debt I had never incurred." Andrew appeared physically ill. "I had no idea," he said softly, his voice barely audible. "Camille told me her parents were helping with the down payment as a gift." "Just one parent," I explained gently. "And it wasn't a gift. It was theft." Mom finally spoke up. "You're twisting everything to make yourself the victim. We've always done everything we could for you. Sometimes families have to make difficult decisions for the greater good." "The greater good?" Dad inquired, his voice rising unexpectedly. "Elaine was 21. Our daughter. And you stole from her." Mom turned on him. "Do not dare to judge me, Thomas. You walked away. You left me to deal with everything." "I left you, not our daughters," he responded. "And I absolutely did not authorize you to steal Evelyn's college fund or commit fraud in her name." "I knew about the college fund," he said, turning to me. "I'm sorry I didn't fight harder for you, but I had no idea about the credit cards and loan." I nodded, accepting his incomplete apologies for what they were. Camille changed her approach after seeing her support crumble. "It was a difficult time," she confessed, tears welling in her eyes. "We had a baby and needed a home. Mom was just trying to help us, and you weren't there to ask." "Maybe," I said. "But that doesn't excuse fraud." I swiped to another document. "Andrew, you might be interested in this too. While investigating the identity theft, I learned a lot about your family finances. These are records of 7 failed business ventures that Camille invested in without your knowledge and with joint funds. The total losses over 9 years exceeded $240,000. Andrew's face turned pale. "Which business ventures?" "Her college friend Brianna's clothing boutique, her cousin's restaurant, and a subscription box service for luxury pet products, among others," I wrote down on paper. "Everyone failed within a year. Everyone received significant investments from your family accounts." "Those were personal loans to friends," Camille explained faintly. "They were going to pay back everything with interest." "Is that why you kept the paperwork hidden?" The room had become uncomfortably tight. Guests were looking for ways out, unsure whether to stay during this clearly private family crisis. "I think," I said loudly, "that we've gotten off track. You came here today to claim my home, assuming that I would once again sacrifice my needs for Camille's desires. I am making it clear that this will never happen again." "So you will throw your own sisters the street?" Mom asked. "Where's your compassion?" "My family out on compassion?" I laughed, but it wasn't funny. "Where was your compassion when I was sleeping in my car during the winter? Where was your compassion when you stole my identity and left me with massive debt before I even started college?" Mom opened her mouth, then closed it again. "I am not throwing anyone out on the street," I clarified softly. "But I will not give up my home. If you require financial assistance, I am happy to discuss setting up education funds for Lucas, Madeline, and Noah. They are innocent in all of this, and I want to know my nieces and nephews." "We do not need your charity," Camille snapped, despite Andrew's expression indicating otherwise. "It is not charity," I answered. "It's the right way to help family," Mom said, grabbing her purse. "I believe we have heard enough. Camille, children, we're leaving." I reminded her that the children were upstairs playing video games. "And I think Andrew might want to stay." Andrew nodded slowly. "I need to understand exactly what has been happening with our finances," my husband said. "Kids will be fine for a while longer." "Fine," my mother responded. "Camille, let us go." Sophia took a step closer to the door. "I believe that is best. This is supposed to be a celebration of Evelyn's new home, not a place to commit property theft." Mom's face turned crimson red. "How dare you? This is a family matter." "Yes," Sophia said. "Evelyn's chosen family is here to support her. Before you return, you should consider what real family support looks like." After they left, the party gradually regained momentum, though discussions naturally focused on the dramatic incident. Andrew remained in the corner, speaking quietly with my financial advisor and checking his phone for Camille's texts. Later, as the guests were leaving, he approached me and formally said, "I owe you an apology. I had no idea about identity theft or investments. I knew about the college fund, but Camille informed me that you had agreed to it. Would it have mattered if you knew the truth?" I questioned. He considered it. "I'd like to think so, but the truth is that I was different back then. Success and money were all that mattered." He looked around the room. "Looking at what you have built on your own, I realized how misguided my priorities have been." "What will you do now?" I inquired. "Have a very difficult conversation with my wife," he said solemnly. "And probably contact a divorce attorney. The financial deceptions are too significant to ignore." I felt an unexpected pang of sadness for my sister. Despite her imperfections, I never wished her marriage to end. "I meant what I said about education funds for the children," I told him. "Regardless of what happens between you and Camille," he nodded graciously. "They would like to know their aunt, especially Lucas. He is interested in programming." After Andrew left to pick up the children, Sophia and I started cleaning up. "Well," she began, tossing glasses into the dishwasher. "That was the most dramatic housewarming I have ever attended." I laughed and felt lighter than I had in years. Not exactly the closure I expected, but closure nonetheless. "Do you think they will try to contact you again?" Sophia inquired. "Mom and Camille. Eventually when they need something," I shut the dishwasher and straightened up. "But next time I will be prepared. No more doormat, Evelyn." As the final guest left and silence descended over my new home, I wandered through each room, admiring what I had created. Not only was it a physical structure, but it also represented a life achieved through dedication, hard work, and the confidence to stand up for myself when it counted most. The days after the housewarming were unexpectedly tranquil. I expected Mom and Camille to torment me with angry phone calls, manipulative texts, and possibly even unannounced visits. Instead, quiet. Andrew phoned me and asked to meet at a coffee shop near his office. "Camille moved in with your mother," he told me over lattes 4 days after the party. "She took the kids for now, but we have agreed to equal custody while we sort things out." "I am sorry about your marriage," I stated truthfully. He shrugged, appearing fatigued and relieved. "After what came to light at your party, I started digging deeper into our finances. It is worse than you know. We are not just struggling. We are nearly bankrupt." "How is that possible?" "You had a good position at the investment firm," had he reiterated. "I was let go 7 months ago, downsizing. I have been working as a financial consultant since then, but making about a third of my previous salary." Meanwhile, Camille continued spending as though nothing had changed. He pushed the folder across the table. "These are statements from accounts I did not even know existed. Credit cards maxed out. Loans I never signed for. Second mortgages on the house before we sold it." While reviewing the records, I experienced a sense of déjà vu. "She did to you what she and Mom did to me?" I inquired. "Except on a much larger scale," he agreed grimly. "We are talking hundreds of thousands in debt." "What will you do?" "Bankruptcy seems inevitable," he admitted. I nodded in understanding. "My offer for education funds still stands. I can set up accounts that can only be used for educational expenses." "That would mean everything," he remarked with sincere gratitude in his voice. "And maybe would you consider spending time with them occasionally? They need stable adults in their lives right now." That conversation signaled the beginning of a new chapter for myself, Andrew, and the children. They were intelligent, inquisitive children who withstood their parents' disagreement with surprising perseverance. Around 3 weeks after the housewarming, Dad invited me to supper. Over pasta at a quiet restaurant, he expressed his thoughts on years of family strife. "I failed you," he admitted honestly. "After the divorce, Elaine made it difficult to maintain contact, but that is no excuse. I should have fought harder to stay involved in your life." "Why did you not?" I asked, finally putting my thoughts into words. "After 11 years, he sighed heavily. "Partly guilt. The divorce was my fault. I had an affair with my second wife. Before leaving. Elaine knew, and she used that as leverage to control everything, including access to you girls. This discovery altered my view of our family relationships, but it did not excuse his absence. I also failed to protect your college fund," he added. "It was in a joint account with Elaine. I trusted her to use it appropriately despite our problems. When I found out what happened, I was too ashamed to confront you about it." "You could have helped me when I was sleeping in my car," I stated. "I did not know," he said. "Elaine told me you had moved in with a friend from school. By the time I learned otherwise, months had passed, and you had stopped responding to my messages. We talked for hours that night, clearing up years of misconceptions, half-truths, and downright lies. Dad was not blameless, but I realized he had been manipulated by Mom almost as much as I had. Your mother was not always like this, he clarified. After Camille was born, something changed. She became obsessed with creating a perfect life for her, often at your expense. I tried to balance things to advocate for you, but it only created more conflict. Why the favoritism? I inquired, the question that had plagued my childhood. He pondered this attentively. I think Camille reminded Elaine of herself, the self she wanted to be. Beautiful, socially adept, traditional. You are more like me. Analytical, independent, questioning. And I think that scared her. The first communication from Camille came 3 days after my meal with Dad, a long email that alternated between apology and justification. She admitted to identity theft, but blamed it on financial desperation and her mother's influence. She apologized for the housewarming argument, but insisted that her family's needs took precedence over my luxury. Classic Camille, Sophia observed as I gave her the email, apologizing without actually accepting responsibility. At least she is acknowledging what happened, I said, feeling more generous now that I was safe from her influence. That is progress. Mother's approach was more straightforward. She began phoning every day, leaving voicemails that ranged from angry accusations to sad pleas. Families should forgive each other, she said in one message. We made mistakes, but so have you by embarrassing us in front of your friends. I did not respond to either of them right away. Instead, I focused on setting clear boundaries with my therapist, Dr. Allison Monroe. Your mother and sister exhibit classic patterns of manipulative behavior, Dr. Monroe observed during one session. They are used to you eventually giving in. Your continued boundary setting is unfamiliar and threatening to them. I feel guilty sometimes, I told her. Especially about the kids being caught in the middle. That is natural, she assured me. But remember, you are modeling healthy boundaries for those children, and you are supporting them directly through the education, funds and quality time. That is genuine family support, not the conditional kind you received. Andrew and Camille's circumstances worsened over the course of several weeks. Their divorce proceedings uncovered other financial deceptions. Andrew filed for bankruptcy as planned. Camille and the children remained in Mom's modest home, which had become cramped and tense. 7 months after the housewarming, Andrew got a better job at a smaller company and rented a 3-bedroom apartment. The custody arrangement granted him access to the children every other week. Throughout his weeks, I would pay Lucas several visits, assisting him with programming assignments or simply offering another supportive adult presence. During one of these encounters, Andrew mentioned that Camille had started therapy. Her therapist suggested it might help with the divorce and financial issues. I am skeptical about her commitment, but it is a start, he told me. Around the same time, I finally agreed to meet Mom for coffee. The conversation was difficult, but respectful. She had aged significantly in the 7 months since the celebration. Living with Camille and the children is challenging, she told me. There is no privacy, no peace, and her spending habits. She paused, shaking her head. You enabled those habits, I kindly pointed out. I wanted her to have everything I did not, Mom explained, an uncommon example of self-awareness. I grew up poor, wore hand-me-downs, never had the nice things other girls had. I swore my daughter would have better. You had 2 daughters, I reminded her. She had the decency to appear embarrassed. I understand. I convinced myself you were stronger, more independent, that you did not need the same support. It was not a complete apology, but it was the closest I had ever gotten. This decades-long pattern of financial deception taught me that Mom's behavior was more than just favoritism. It revealed underlying issues of control, entitlement, and possibly untreated mental health problems. Meanwhile, Camille's therapy looked to be generating actual results. Our weekly meals with the kids moved from awkward to cautiously enjoyable. She got a job as an administrative assistant at a local company, her first serious job since marriage, and moved into a modest apartment when living with Mom became too expensive for both of them. I have never learned to stand on my own, she admitted at one of our discussions. Mom did everything for me. Then Andrew took over. When everything fell apart, I had no idea how to function independently. I felt an unexpected sense of compassion as I saw her struggle with fundamental adult chores like budgeting, meal planning, and home maintenance. Camille, like me, had been a victim of Mom's dysfunction, albeit in a different way. Her golden child status had hampered her ability to build resilience and self-sufficiency. The children adapted to their new situation with surprising adaptability. Lucas, now 12, thrived in the coding group I introduced him to. Madeline acquired a fascination for science that neither Camille nor Andrew had recognized. Noah's dinosaur passion grew into a more general interest in natural history. I established college funds for each of them, with the condition that the funds be spent solely for educational purposes, a safeguard against history repeating itself. Andrew and I formed an unexpected friendship based on mutual respect. He confronted the financial calamity full-on, gradually repairing his credit and profession while becoming a more present father than he had ever been during his marriage. The bankruptcy was humiliating, he admitted, but freeing. Not all relationships could be saved, however. Mom continued to avoid actual accountability, alternating between superficial apologies and sly explanations. During one especially challenging meal, she mentioned that my success was owed in part to her tough love style. If we had not pushed you out of the nest, would you have developed the same drive, she wondered, as if my homelessness had been a deliberate teaching moment rather than abandonment. I cautiously set down my fork. That is like saying abuse makes people stronger. Some survive despite it, not because of it. I succeeded in spite of how you treated me. Not because of it. She swiftly changed the subject, as she was always uncomfortable with direct confrontation. These incidents confirmed Dr. Monroe's assessment that while Mom may change her conduct to preserve contact, true remorse or insight may never arrive. Some people are not capable of the depth of self-reflection necessary for genuine change. You can adjust your expectations accordingly, Dr. Monroe told me, and decide what kind of limited relationship, if any, serves your well-being. By the time my house's 18-month anniversary neared, I had set clear guidelines for family interaction. Monthly lunches with Camille and the kids, occasional coffees with Mom, regular dinners with Dad, and more frequent time with the kids during Andrew's custody weeks. To commemorate the event, I arranged a small gathering in stark contrast to the previous year's grand housewarming. Sophia accompanied her new fiancé. Professor Helen Whitaker and her husband attended. Dad arrived with Rebecca, their relationship now serious. Andrew brought the kids for a few hours. Even Camille made a brief and charming visit. Mom was noticeably absent, her choice after I declined to invite certain toxic family friends she insisted on including. It was a little but crucial win in keeping my boundaries. And, as the evening progressed and people had dessert on the patio, Lucas approached me with his laptop. Aunt Evelyn, can you look at my code? I am trying to build a game, but the graphics will not render properly. We sat on the porch swing, solving his JavaScript issues as fireflies blinked in the coming dusk. The simple moment, an aunt assisting her nephew, family members supporting one another in healthy ways, brought tears to my eyes which I quickly wiped away. Are you okay? Lucas inquired, noting my emotion. More than okay, I told him. Just happy you're here. Later that night when everyone had left, I wandered through my home, which was genuinely mine in every way. The house had become a haven, not only from the outer world, but also from the harmful family habits that had nearly ruined me. Within these confines, I had created new rituals, connections, and a new understanding of family that was based on mutual respect rather than duty or manipulation. My journey from sleeping in my van at 21 to owning this lovely home at 31 was not solely about financial gain. It was about reclaiming my worth, setting healthy boundaries and creating a life that reflected my ideals rather than others' expectations. My ties with my family would most certainly remain complex. Mom may never fully admit the devastation she has caused. Camille's growth potential may be limited. Dad's attempts to make amends could not undo years of absence. However, I no longer required their validation or approval to feel whole. The terrified 21-year-old who drove away from her childhood home with nowhere to go had discovered not just safety, but also strength. She had realized that family is sometimes chosen rather than born, and that standing in your truth, no matter how difficult, results in genuine connection rather than a hollow performance of obligation. As I sat on my veranda with a cup of tea, watching the stars appear in the summer sky, I felt tremendous serenity. The voyage had not been easy, but it had taken me exactly where I needed to be. Home, in all senses of the word. My dad sent me $14,000 in allowance over 6 years, but Mom stole every dollar and hid my identity, until the truth forced her to pay it back in shame. The dining room felt unusually quiet that Tuesday evening. The only sounds were the gentle clinking of silverware against our blue ceramic plates and the distant hum of the dishwasher finishing its cycle. Mom had made her famous pot roast, the one that usually filled the house with warmth and comfort. But tonight, even that familiar smell couldn't shake the strange tension I'd been feeling all week. Dad cleared his throat and set down his fork, the way he always did when he was about to say something important. I braced myself for another lecture about college applications or my grades, but instead he asked something completely unexpected. Sarah, is your allowance enough these days? I know college applications cost money, and with all the fees for SAT prep and everything. The bite of carrots I'd been chewing suddenly felt like cardboard in my mouth. I swallowed hard and stared at him with genuine confusion. What allowance? The reaction was immediate and startling. Dad's hand froze halfway to his mouth, holding a piece of beef that would never complete its journey. His eyes went wide, and for a moment, he looked like someone had just told him the sky was purple. Mom's reaction was even more dramatic. Her fork clattered against her plate so loudly it made me jump. She was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Part shock, part panic, part something else I couldn't quite identify. What do you mean, what allowance? Her voice came out as barely more than a whisper, but there was an edge to it that made my stomach clench. I looked between my parents, feeling like I'd somehow said the wrong thing without knowing what the right thing would have been. I mean, I've never gotten an allowance. I don't know what you're talking about. The silence that followed stretched on forever. I could hear the grandfather clock in the living room ticking, marking each uncomfortable second. Outside, Mrs. Patterson's dog was barking at something, but inside our dining room, nobody moved. Dad slowly lowered his fork to his plate. The color had drained from his face, leaving him looking pale and confused. Sarah, sweetheart, I've been giving you $200 every month since you turned 12. It comes out of my checking account automatically on the 15th. My heart started beating faster. $200 a month for 6 years? That would be... I tried to do the math in my head, but the numbers seemed impossible. Over $14,000? Dad, I promise you, I've never seen that money. I would definitely remember getting $200 every month. I pulled out my phone, fingers trembling slightly as I opened my banking app. Look, here's my account. The only money coming in is my paycheck from Miller's Market. I turned the phone so both my parents could see the screen. There it was, my pathetic checking account balance of $347, with deposits every 2 weeks from my part-time job at the grocery store. No mysterious $200 deposits anywhere. Mom stood up so abruptly that her chair scraped against the hardwood floor with a sound like nails on a chalkboard. This is ridiculous, she said, but her voice was shaky. Of course you get your allowance. We put it directly into your account every month. What account? I asked again, holding up my phone. This is my only account, and there's no allowance money in it. Dad was already pushing back from the table, his face grim with determination. I'm getting the bank statements right now. There has to be some mistake. As he headed toward his office, I caught Mom's eye across the table. She was still standing, gripping the back of her chair so tightly her knuckles had turned white. There was something in her expression that I'd never seen before, a kind of desperate fear that made my chest tight with anxiety. Mom, what's going on? I asked softly. She sat back down heavily, like her legs couldn't support her anymore. I'm sure it's just a banking error, she said. But she wouldn't meet my eyes. Instead, she started fidgeting with her napkin, folding it into smaller and smaller squares, then unfolding it, and starting over. The 10 minutes Dad was gone felt like 10 hours. I tried to eat more of my dinner, but everything tasted like dust. Mom hadn't touched her food since Dad left the table. She just kept folding and unfolding that napkin, staring at it like it held the answers to life's greatest mysteries. When I heard Dad's footsteps coming back down the hallway, my stomach dropped. Something about the heaviness of his walk told me this wasn't going to be good news. He appeared in the doorway holding a thick stack of papers, his face set in lines I'd rarely seen. Without a word, he walked back to the table and started pushing aside our plates, making room for the documents. Here it is, he said, his voice flat and tired. $200, transferred on the 15th of every month for the past 6 years. He spread the bank statements across our dinner table like he was laying out evidence in a courtroom. Every single month, without fail. I leaned over to look at the papers, my heart pounding so hard I was sure my parents could hear it. There they were, dozens and dozens of transfers, all labeled Sarah Allowance. The amounts were exactly what Dad had said, $200, every month, going back years. But something was wrong. Dad, I said, pointing to the account number at the bottom of each transfer receipt. This isn't my account number. He looked where I was pointing, then at my phone screen showing my banking app, then back at the papers. I watched the color drain from his face completely. Then whose account is this? He asked, his voice barely audible. The question hung in the air between us like a physical presence. I felt like I couldn't breathe properly. If the money wasn't going to me, and it wasn't going to some random stranger, then where had $14,000 gone over the past 6 years? I looked at Mom, hoping she might have some explanation, some reasonable answer that would make this all make sense. But she was staring at the bank statements with an expression that looked almost like guilt. Mom? I said. Do you know anything about this? She opened her mouth like she was going to speak, then closed it again. Her hands were trembling now, and the napkin she'd been folding was completely shredded. There has to be a logical explanation, Dad said, but he didn't sound convinced. I'll call the bank first thing tomorrow morning. This has to be some kind of error. But even as he said it, I could see in his eyes that he was starting to suspect it wasn't an error at all. We sat in terrible silence for the rest of dinner, though none of us ate much. The pot roast that had smelled so good an hour earlier now seemed cold and unappetizing. Every few minutes Dad would pick up one of the bank statements and stare at it, like he was hoping the account number would magically change to match mine. Mom excused herself early, claiming she had a headache. As she left the dining room, she paused in the doorway and looked back at us with an expression I couldn't read. I'm sure everything will make sense tomorrow, she said, but her voice sounded hollow. After she was gone, Dad and I sat at the table surrounded by the evidence of 6 years of mysterious transfers. The numbers on the pages seemed to mock us, raising questions neither of us was ready to answer. Dad, I said finally, what if it's not a mistake? He looked up from the papers, and I saw something in his eyes that scared me. The beginning of doubt about someone he'd trusted completely for 20 years. Let's wait and see what the bank says tomorrow, he said, but his voice was heavy with the same fear that was growing in my chest. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with possibilities. Where had my allowance money been going for 6 years? Who had access to create an account that wasn't mine? And why did Mom look so scared when we found out about it? The answers, I was beginning to suspect, were going to change everything. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Dad's voice echoing from the kitchen. Even from upstairs, I could hear the frustration in his tone as he spoke to someone on the phone. I checked my clock, 7:30 a.m. He must have called the bank the moment they opened. I threw on my robe and padded downstairs, following the sound of his increasingly agitated voice. Mom was standing at the kitchen counter, still in her pajamas, clutching a coffee mug like it was a lifeline. She looked like she hadn't slept at all. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her usually perfect hair was disheveled. No, I need to speak to someone who can tell me about this account, Dad was saying into the phone. I've been transferred 4 times already. Yes, I'll hold again. But this is ridiculous. He caught sight of me in the doorway and gave me a tired smile that didn't reach his eyes. The phone was pressed against his ear, and I could hear the tinny sound of hold music playing. How long have you been on the phone? I asked. Since 7, he said. I've talked to 3 different people, and they keep transferring me to someone else. Apparently the account information is restricted and requires a supervisor. Mom turned around at the sound of my voice, and I was shocked by how pale she looked. Her hands were shaking slightly as she raised the coffee mug to her lips. Morning, sweetheart, she said, but her voice sounded strained and artificial. Did you sleep okay? Before I could answer, Dad's attention snapped back to the phone. Yes, I'm still here. Patricia. Thank you for taking my call. I need information about account transfers that have been going out of my checking account for the past 6 years. I moved closer, trying to hear both sides of the conversation. Dad had put the phone on speaker without realizing it, and Patricia's professional voice filled our kitchen. I can see the transfers you're referring to, Mr. Bell. They're going to an account under the name Sarah Morrison Chen. Is that your daughter? The coffee mug slipped from Mom's hands and crashed to the kitchen floor, sending ceramic shards and hot coffee everywhere. But she didn't move to clean it up. She just stood there, staring at the mess at her feet like she was seeing something else entirely. Could you repeat that name? Dad asked, his voice very careful and controlled. Sarah Morrison Chen, Patricia said clearly. The account was opened in 2018, and it's been receiving monthly transfers from your account since then. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. But that's not my name, I said, loud enough for Patricia to hear through the phone. My name is Sarah Morrison Bell. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Is this Sarah? Patricia asked. Yes, but my last name is Bell, not Chen. I've never heard of any account under the name Chen. That's unusual, Patricia said. Mr. Bell, do you have any family members named Chen who might have access to your daughter's information? Dad looked at Mom, who was still standing frozen among the broken coffee mug pieces. Coffee was soaking into her slippers, but she didn't seem to notice. No, Dad said slowly. We don't know anyone named Chen. He paused, then asked the question I could see forming in his eyes. Patricia, can you tell me who opened that account? Another pause. According to our records, the account was opened by Donna Morrison, using Sarah Morrison Chen's information. She's listed as the account holder's guardian. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad stared at Mom with an expression of complete bewilderment. I felt like I was watching a movie where someone had suddenly started speaking a different language. Donna, Dad said quietly. What is she talking about? Mom finally looked up from the broken mug. Her face was paper white, and tears were streaming down her cheeks. I can explain, she whispered. Then please do, Dad said, but his voice had gone cold in a way I'd never heard before. Instead of explaining, Mom looked at me with an expression of pure panic, then at Dad, then back at me. I need some air, she said suddenly. Mom, wait! I started, but she was already moving toward the back door. Donna, you can't just leave, Dad called after her. We need to talk about this. But she was gone, disappearing through the back door and into our garden. Through the kitchen window, I could see her walking quickly toward the gate that led to the street, her pajamas bright against the morning sunlight. Dad ended the call with Patricia after getting the account details, promising to come into the bank later that day. We stood in the coffee-stained kitchen, surrounded by broken ceramic and unanswered questions. Dad, I said slowly, why would Mom open a bank account using a different last name for me? He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I recognized as his way of dealing with stress. I have absolutely no idea, Sarah. This doesn't make any sense. We spent the next 20 minutes cleaning up the broken mug and mopping coffee off the kitchen floor. Neither of us spoke much, but I could practically hear the wheels turning in Dad's head. Every few minutes he'd stop what he was doing and stare out the window, like he was hoping Mom would come back and explain everything. It was Dad who noticed that Mom had left her purse behind. The brown leather bag she carried everywhere was sitting on the kitchen counter, right where she'd dropped it when she grabbed her coffee that morning. Should we? I started, then trailed off. Looking through someone's purse felt like a violation of privacy. I don't know, Dad said, staring at the bag like it might bite him. But Sarah, your mother just ran out of here after we discovered she's been operating a secret bank account in your name. I think we're past worrying about privacy. As if to make the decision for us, the purse tipped over, and contents spilled across the counter. Wallet, keys, lipstick, breath mints, all the usual stuff. But there was also a manila envelope that looked official and important. And written across the front in Mom's handwriting was, Sarah Morrison Chen. Dad and I looked at each other. I think we have to look now, he said quietly. Inside the envelope were documents I'd never seen before. The first was a birth certificate, but not the one I knew about. This one had my name listed as Sarah Morrison Chen, and my mother listed as Amy Chen. The father was listed as unknown. Dad, I whispered. This says Amy Chen is my mother. His hands were shaking as he took the birth certificate from me. That can't be right. You're Donna's daughter. I was there when you were born. But as we looked through more documents, a different story began to emerge. Adoption papers dated when I was 3 months old. Foster care records showing I'd spent the first 90 days of my life in the system. Hospital records from a birth that had happened not at General Hospital like Mom had always told me, but at St. Mary's across town. And at the bottom of the stack, a photograph that made my breath catch in my throat. It was a picture of a baby who looked remarkably like my own baby photos, being held by a young Asian woman I'd never seen before. On the back of the photo, someone had written in careful script, Sarah's first mother. Goodbye for now. Oh my God, I said, sinking into one of the kitchen chairs. I'm adopted. Dad sat down across from me, still holding the birth certificate. His face had gone through about a dozen different expressions in the past few minutes. Confusion, shock, understanding, and now something that looked like grief. According to these papers, he said slowly, your biological mother's name is Amy Chen. You were born at St. Mary's Hospital on March 15th, not March 20th like we've always celebrated your birthday. My birthday is wrong too? I felt like everything I'd ever known about myself was crumbling. Dad kept reading through the documents. It says here you spent 3 months in foster care before the adoption was finalized. Sarah, according to this, I'm not listed as your biological father either. I stared at him, feeling panic rise in my chest. But you are my dad, right? I mean, you're still my dad. Of course I'm your dad, he said firmly, reaching across the table to take my hand. I've been your father for 18 years. Biology doesn't change that, but Sarah. He paused, looking at the papers again. I think your mother and I need to have a very serious conversation about why she never told us you were adopted. At the very bottom of the envelope was a letter that looked much more recent than the other documents. It was written on plain white paper, and dated just 2 months ago. Dear Sarah, it began, and I felt my heart start racing again. I hope this letter finds you well and happy. I know it's been 18 years since I made the hardest decision of my life, but not a day has gone by that I haven't thought about you. I had to stop reading and take a deep breath. Dad was watching me with concern. You okay? He asked. This is from Amy Chen, I said. My biological mother. I continued reading. I've been sending money every month since you turned 12, hoping it helps with your education and the things you need. I know $200 isn't much, but I work 2 jobs now and it's the best I can do. I just want to contribute something to your life, even from far away. Dad, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She's been sending the money. The $200 every month. That's where it's been coming from. His face went very still as the implications sank in. You mean the money I've been transferring? It wasn't my money going to you. It was her money, and I was just passing it along? But it wasn't getting to me, I said. It was going to that account Mom opened. We looked at each other across the kitchen table and I could see the same terrible realization forming in both our minds. The letter continued. I hope someday we can meet. I hope you understand why I had to give you up. I was 17 and scared, but I've never stopped loving you. I write to you every week, but I was told you don't want contact with me. Still, I hope that might change someday. All my love, Amy Chen. I read the last part twice, feeling sick to my stomach. Dad, she says she was told I don't want contact with her. Who would tell her that? He asked, but I could see in his eyes that we both knew the answer. When Mom came back 3 hours later, Dad and I were still sitting at the kitchen table. All the documents were spread out in front of us like evidence in a trial. She took one look at the papers and sank into a chair like all the strength had gone out of her legs. I can explain, she said for the 3rd time in 24 hours. Please do, Dad said. His voice was calm, but I could hear years of trust cracking underneath it. Mom's hands were shaking as she reached for Amy Chen's letter. She read it slowly, her lips moving slightly with each word, and I watched her face crumble with what looked like shame and regret. I was going to tell you, she said finally, her voice barely audible. When you turned 18, I was going to explain everything. Explain what? I demanded. The anger that had been building in my chest for hours was finally spilling over. That I'm adopted? That you've been lying to me my entire life? That my real mother has been trying to contact me and you've been blocking her? I'm your real mother. The words exploded out of her with surprising force. I'm the one who stayed up all night when you had pneumonia when you were 4. I'm the one who taught you to ride a bike and helped you with your homework and worried about you every single day for 18 years. And you're also the one who stole money from my birth mother, I shot back. Money she was sending to help take care of me. Mom flinched like I'd slapped her. I didn't steal anything. I used that money for family expenses. The kitchen renovation, your father's car repair when it broke down, your college savings account. My college savings account has $3,000 in it, I interrupted. If you'd been putting Amy's money in there for 6 years, it would have $14,000. Dad had been silent through this exchange, but now he spoke up. His voice deadly quiet. Donna. Where did the money go? She couldn't meet his eyes. I told you. Family expenses. The house, the car, your business loan last year when things got tight. You used money meant for Sarah to pay for my business loan? Dad's voice was getting louder. Without telling me where it was coming from? I was trying to keep our family together. Mom's composure was completely gone now. She was crying openly, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Do you know what it's like to live with the fear that your daughter might be taken away from you? That her birth mother might come back and want her? Nobody was going to take me away, I said, but even as I said it, I wasn't sure that was true. Would I have wanted to know Amy Chen when I was 12? Would I have wanted a relationship with her? You don't know that, Mom said desperately. She was sending money, writing letters, asking to meet you. What if you had decided you wanted to live with her instead? So you decided to make that choice for me? The betrayal felt like a physical weight in my chest. You decided to keep me from knowing I had a biological mother who wanted to be part of my life? Dad was staring at Mom like he'd never seen her before. Donna, how long have you known she was adopted? Since the beginning, Mom whispered. Since before we got married. The silence that followed was devastating. I could see Dad processing this information, realizing that their entire 20-year marriage had been built on a fundamental lie. You've been lying to me for 20 years, he said slowly. I wasn't lying, I didn't tell you everything. What else? His voice was flat now, emotionless. What else haven't you told me? Mom looked trapped, like a deer in headlights. There might be other things. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. I can't do this right now. I need to call Amy. Sarah, please don't, Mom said, reaching for my arm. Let me explain everything first. I pulled away from her. You've had 18 years to explain. I think Amy Chen deserves to know that I just found out I exist. Amy Chen answered her phone on the third ring. Her voice was soft and warm when she said hello, with just a trace of an accent I couldn't place. Is this Amy Chen? I asked, my heart pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it through the phone. Yes. Who is this? I took a deep breath. This is Sarah. Sarah Morrison Chen, I guess. The silence that followed stretched so long, I thought the call might have dropped. Then, Sarah? My Sarah? I think so. I found your letter today. She started crying then, and so did I. We were both sobbing into our phones like teenagers, which, I guess I still was. It took several minutes before either of us could speak coherently. I can't believe it's really you, she said through her tears. I've been waiting for this call for 6 years. I just found out today that I was adopted, I told her. I had no idea you existed until this morning. What? Her voice changed, becoming sharp with confusion. But I've been writing to you through your adoptive mother. She said you didn't want direct contact, but that you were doing well. I never got any letters, I said. And I never got the money you were sending either. There was another long pause. When Amy spoke again, her voice was cold with understanding. She intercepted everything. It looks that way. We talked for 2 hours that first phone call. Amy told me about my grandparents, who had died when I was 10 and 15, deaths I'd never known about because I'd never known they existed. She told me about my half-brother Kevin, who was 15 now and had been asking about his sister for years. She told me about the 2 jobs she worked, cleaning offices at night and working at a daycare during the day, and how she'd been saving every extra penny to send to me. I kept a shoebox full of things I wanted to give you, she said. Birthday presents, Christmas gifts, letters I wrote but was told I couldn't send. I kept thinking someday. I want to meet you, I said impulsively. Are you sure? I don't want to cause problems with your family. I looked through the kitchen doorway, where I could see Mom and Dad having what looked like the most serious conversation of their marriage. I think my family already has problems. We agreed to meet the following Saturday at a coffee shop called Sunrise Cafe downtown. It was neutral territory, public enough to feel safe but quiet enough to talk. Sarah, Amy said before we hung up, I want you to know that I never stopped thinking about you. Every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone I missed, I thought about what you might be doing, who you were becoming. I wish I had known about you sooner, I said, and I meant it. After I hung up, I sat in my room for a long time, staring at the adoption papers and trying to process everything I'd learned. My entire identity had shifted in the space of a single day. I wasn't who I'd thought I was. My birthday was wrong, my medical history was a mystery, and I had a biological family I'd never known about. But more than that, I felt angry. Angry at Mom for lying. Angry at the system that had allowed this to happen. Angry at myself for never questioning the gaps in my early childhood memories. When I finally went downstairs for dinner, the tension in the house was thick enough to cut with a knife. Dad had made grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, comfort food, but none of us were eating much. How did it go? Mom asked quietly. With your phone call? Her name is Amy, I said. And I'm meeting her on Saturday. Mom's face went pale. Sarah, please think about this. You don't know anything about her. She could be what? I interrupted. A loving mother who's been trying to be part of my life for 18 years while you blocked her at every turn? She gave you up, Mom said desperately. She didn't want you. She was 17, I said. And according to these documents, she was pressured into the adoption by social services and by you. Dad looked up from his untouched soup. What do you mean pressured? I pulled out another document I'd found in the envelope. One we hadn't discussed yet. There are notes here from the social worker. Amy wanted to keep me, but she was told she was too young, too poor, too unstable. And there are records of meetings between the social worker and Mom, where Mom apparently convinced them that Amy would be an unfit mother. That's not, Mom started. It's right here in black and white, I said, holding up the papers. You actively worked to make sure Amy couldn't keep me. And then you made sure she couldn't contact me afterward. The look Dad gave Mom was unlike anything I'd ever seen pass between them. It was pure disappointment, mixed with a kind of grief that made my chest ache. Donna, he said quietly. Tell me you didn't manipulate a 17-year-old girl into giving up her baby. I was protecting Sarah, Mom said, but her voice was weak. I was giving her a stable home, good parents. You were stealing her, I said. And then you stole money from her biological mother for 6 years. Mom started crying again, but this time it felt manipulative rather than genuine. Everything I did out of love. I love you, Sarah. You're my daughter. Love doesn't lie, I said, standing up from the table. Love doesn't steal. And love doesn't keep a child from knowing where she came from. I left them sitting at the dinner table and went to my room to research Amy Chen online. It didn't take long to find her. She had a small social media presence, mostly pictures of a teenage boy who looked remarkably like me, and posts about her work at the daycare. She looked tired in most of the photos, but happy. There were several pictures of her at what looked like school events for my half-brother, and one photo from last Christmas where she was wearing a t-shirt that said, "World's Best Mom," that Kevin had apparently given her. She looked like someone who had worked hard for everything she had. Someone who had made sacrifices. Someone who had never stopped hoping to see her daughter again. That night, I lay in bed thinking about nature versus nurture, about the family who had raised me, and the family I'd never known I had. Mom was right about one thing. She had been there for all the important moments of my childhood. But she'd also stolen those same moments from Amy, who had been working 2 jobs and saving money and writing letters to a daughter who never knew she existed. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Not just at the deception, but at the arrogance of it. Mom had decided she knew what was best for everyone, for me, for Amy, for Dad. She'd made choices that affected all our lives without consulting any of us. But Saturday was still 5 days away, and I had to figure out how to get through those days living in a house where every conversation felt like stepping through a minefield. Part 4. The rest of the week passed in a strange, tense fog. Dad had moved into the guest bedroom, and the silence between my parents was deafening. I caught them having hushed, intense conversations that stopped the moment I walked into a room. Mom kept trying to corner me alone, wanting to explain her side of things, but I wasn't ready to hear it. On Thursday evening, she knocked on my bedroom door while I was doing homework. Sarah? Can we talk? I didn't look up from my calculus problems. I don't think there's anything to talk about. Please, just 5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I let her in. She sat on the edge of my bed, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. I know you're angry, she began. Angry doesn't begin to cover it. I need you to understand why I did what I did. Her voice was pleading. When we adopted you, you were so tiny, so perfect. You'd been in foster care for 3 months, and you were underweight and behind on all your developmental milestones. The foster family said you cried constantly. Despite myself, I was listening. When we brought you home, you were so sick. You had an ear infection and a respiratory infection, and you wouldn't eat. I spent weeks nursing you back to health, staying up all night, taking you to doctor appointments. You were my baby, Sarah. Not biologically, but in every way that mattered. That doesn't excuse what you did to Amy, I said quietly. Mom's face crumpled. When Amy started sending money and letters, I panicked. I thought she was trying to take you back. I thought she was going to disrupt our family. So you decided to disrupt hers instead? I thought I was protecting you. The words came out as almost a wail. You were happy, Sarah. You were thriving. You had friends and good grades and a stable home. Why would I risk all of that for someone who gave you up? Because she's my mother too, I said, and the words felt strange in my mouth. I'm your mother, Mom said fiercely. I'm the one who was here. I'm the one who… I know what you did for me, I interrupted. But that doesn't erase what you kept from me. And it doesn't excuse stealing money from someone who was working 2 jobs to try to help her daughter. Mom was quiet for a long moment. What can I do to fix this? I don't know if you can fix it, I said honestly. But you could start by telling me the whole truth. All of it. She took a shaky breath. There are things that might hurt you to know. I think I'm past worrying about being hurt by the truth. So she told me. About how Amy had been homeless for part of her pregnancy, staying in shelters and with friends. About how she'd begged to keep me, promising to get a job and an apartment. But the social workers had convinced her she couldn't provide a stable home. About how Mom had presented herself as the perfect alternative. Married, financially stable, desperate for a child after years of infertility. I wasn't lying about wanting you, Mom said. We'd been trying to have a baby for 8 years. When they told us about you, it felt like a miracle. But you made sure Amy couldn't change her mind. Mom nodded miserably. I was afraid she would. Even after the adoption was finalized, I was afraid. And when she started trying to contact you, I thought if you knew about her, you might choose her over us. So you chose for me. Yes. And I know that was wrong now. But Sarah, I was so scared of losing you. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years, maybe ever. But it didn't change what she'd done. If anything, understanding her motivations made it worse, because it showed how calculated her deception had been. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood perfectly. I changed clothes 3 times, unsure what you wear to meet the mother who gave birth to you, but never got to raise you. Finally I settled on jeans and a sweater. Casual but nice, the kind of outfit that said I was taking this seriously without trying too hard. Dad offered to drive me to Sunrise Cafe, but I wanted to take the bus. I needed the time to think, to prepare myself for whatever this meeting might bring. Are you sure you don't want me to come with you? He asked as I grabbed my jacket. I need to do this alone, I said. Mom appeared in the hallway as I was heading for the door. Sarah, wait. I turned around, expecting another plea to reconsider. If you decide you want to have a relationship with her, I understand, she said quietly. I won't try to stop you. It was the first time since this whole mess started that she'd put my needs ahead of her own fears. Sunrise Cafe was busy for a Saturday morning, filled with the usual mix of college students studying and families having weekend breakfast. I arrived 15 minutes early and claimed a table in the corner, ordering a coffee I didn't really want just to have something to do with my hands. I spotted Amy the moment she walked through the door. It was like looking at a version of myself in 20 years. Same dark hair, same nose, same way of scanning the room nervously before making eye contact. She was smaller than I'd expected, maybe 5'3", and prettier than her Facebook photos had shown. When she saw me, her face lit up with a smile so bright it took my breath away. We stared at each other for a moment across the busy cafe, and I felt 18 years of questions and longing pass between us in that single look. Sarah, she said softly as she approached my table. Hi, I said, standing up awkwardly. Amy? And then we were hugging, and she was crying, and I was crying, and half the cafe was probably staring at us, but I didn't care. She smelled like vanilla and something floral, and her hug felt like safety in a way that was both foreign and familiar. You're so beautiful, she whispered into my hair. You're so much more beautiful than I even imagined. When we finally sat down, Amy couldn't stop looking at me, like she was afraid I might disappear. I've dreamed about this moment for 18 years, she said. But now that it's happening, I don't know what to say. Tell me about yourself, I said. Tell me about our family. Her face lit up again. Our family. I liked the sound of that. She told me about my grandparents, both gone now but full of life when they were alive. My grandmother had been a seamstress who made beautiful quilts, and my grandfather had run a small restaurant in Chinatown. They'd immigrated from Taiwan in the 1960s, bringing recipes and traditions that Amy had tried to preserve. They were so excited when I was pregnant with you, she said. My mother started knitting baby blankets the day I told her. When I had to give you up, it broke their hearts. They asked about you every week until they died. She showed me pictures on her phone, grandparents I'd never met, holding baby blankets meant for me. Family gatherings where there was always an empty space, always someone missing. And Kevin, she said, pulling up photos of my half-brother. He's been asking about his sister since he was old enough to understand what that meant. He was so angry when he found out I'd been sending you money and letters and never getting responses. He thought you hated us. I didn't even know you existed, I said, still struggling with that reality. Amy's face darkened. I should have fought harder. I should have insisted on direct contact instead of going through Donna. Tell me about that, I said. How did the adoption happen? Amy's story was different from what Mom had told me, but the details filled in gaps I'd never known existed. She'd been 17, living with her boyfriend who'd abandoned her when she got pregnant. She'd been working at a fast food restaurant, trying to save money for an apartment, when she'd gone into premature labor. You were born 6 weeks early, she said. Tiny and perfect, but you had to stay in the hospital for 2 weeks. I spent every day there, holding you, feeding you, falling in love with you. But you couldn't keep me. The social worker said I couldn't provide a stable home. I was living in a women's shelter at the time, and I didn't have health insurance or a high school diploma. She wiped tears from her eyes. Donna and your father seemed like a miracle. Married, financially stable, desperate for a child. The social worker said it would be selfish to keep you when I could give you so much more by letting them adopt you. Did you want to keep me? More than anything in the world, she said without hesitation. But I also wanted what was best for you. And at the time, I thought that was them. She told me about the years after the adoption, how she'd finished high school and gotten a job at the daycare where she still worked. How she'd met Kevin's father when Kevin was 2, and how they'd lived together for several years before he'd died in a car accident when Kevin was 8. I never stopped thinking about you, she said. Every milestone Kevin hit, I wondered if you were hitting them too. When he started kindergarten, I wondered what your first day of school was like. When he learned to ride a bike, I wondered if you were learning too. I was, I said softly. Mom taught me in our driveway when I was 6. Amy smiled through her tears. Good. I'm glad she was there for those moments. It was a generous thing to say, given everything Mom had done. We talked for 4 hours that first meeting. Amy told me about my heritage, about traditions and foods and stories I'd never heard. She showed me pictures of relatives who had my hands, my stubbornness, my laugh. She told me about Kevin's excitement when she'd called to tell him she was finally going to meet me. He wants to meet you too, she said. But I told him we should take things slow. I don't want to overwhelm you. I'd like to meet him, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. When it was finally time to leave, Amy walked me to the bus stop. Can we do this again? She asked. Can I see you again? I'd like that, I said. She hugged me goodbye, and I could feel her reluctance to let me go. Sarah, she said. I need you to know something. Whatever relationship we have going forward, whatever you decide you want this to be, I'm grateful. I'm grateful for today, for getting to see the amazing person you've become, for knowing you're okay. On the bus ride home, I thought about the 2 women who both called themselves my mother. Mom, who had raised me and loved me and also lied to me for 18 years. Amy, who had given birth to me and never stopped loving me from a distance, working 2 jobs to send money to a daughter she wasn't allowed to contact. I didn't know how to reconcile these 2 versions of motherhood, or how to build a relationship with Amy without hurting Mom, or how to forgive Mom without betraying Amy. All I knew was that my life had become infinitely more complicated, but also infinitely richer. I had a brother I'd never met, grandparents I'd never known, a whole heritage and history that had been kept from me, and I had choices to make about what kind of family I wanted to build going forward. When I got home from meeting Amy, I found Dad sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a grim expression. Mom was nowhere to be seen. How did it go? He asked. Good, I said, then corrected myself. Actually, it was incredible. She's really nice, Dad, and I have a half-brother named Kevin who's 15. Dad nodded slowly. I'm glad it went well. You deserve to know your biological family. Where's Mom? Upstairs. She's been crying most of the day. He rubbed his temples like he had a headache. Sarah, we need to talk about what happens next. I sat down across from him, suddenly feeling exhausted. What do you mean? I mean, your mother and I are having serious problems. This isn't just about the money or even about hiding the adoption. It's about 18 years of lies, and I don't know how to get past that. The weight of his words settled over me like a heavy blanket. Are you getting divorced? I don't know yet. But I've asked your mother to stay at her sister's place for a while. We both need some space to think. I felt a stab of panic. Despite everything Mom had done, the thought of our family completely falling apart was terrifying. Dad, I don't want to be the reason you guys split up. You're not the reason, he said firmly. The lies are the reason. The deception is the reason. Sarah, if your mother could hide something this big for this long, what else has she hidden? How do I trust her again? I didn't have an answer for that. Over the next few weeks, a new routine developed. Mom stayed at Aunt Linda's house across town, coming by occasionally to pick up clothes or have awkward conversations with me. Dad and I learned to cook together, badly, and the house felt both more peaceful and more empty. Amy and I started meeting regularly, sometimes for coffee, sometimes for lunch. Sometimes she'd pick me up after school and we'd go for walks in the park. She told me stories about my grandparents, taught me a few words in Mandarin, and showed me pictures of relatives I looked like. The most emotional meeting happened 3 weeks after we first met, when Amy brought a shoebox to our coffee date. I told you I saved things for you, she said, setting the worn cardboard box on the table between us. Birthday presents, Christmas gifts, letters I wrote but couldn't send. I know you're too old for some of this stuff now, but... Inside the box were 18 years of love. Baby toys I'd never played with. A stuffed elephant meant for my first birthday. School supplies for a first day of kindergarten I'd spent with different parents. A pink bicycle helmet for the bike rides I'd taken with Mom instead of her. Jewelry for Sweet 16 and graduation milestones that had come and gone without her. But it was the letters that broke my heart. Hundreds of them, written on different kinds of paper over the years. Some were typed, some handwritten. Some obviously written late at night when Amy couldn't sleep for missing me. I read them in chronological order, watching myself grow up through Amy's imagination. Letters to a 2-year-old about starting to walk and talk. Letters to a 5-year-old starting kindergarten. Letters to a 10-year-old losing her first tooth. Letters to a 16-year-old learning to drive. Happy sweet 16, my beautiful daughter, one letter read. I hope someone is throwing you a party today. I hope you're wearing something that makes you feel pretty. I hope you know that somewhere across town your first mother is thinking about you and wishing you joy. I had to stop reading because I was crying too hard to see the words. I'm sorry, Amy said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. I didn't mean to upset you. I'm not upset, I said through my tears. I'm grateful. These are beautiful. She smiled, crying a little herself. I used to imagine giving them to you on your 18th birthday. I thought maybe by then, you'd want to meet me. I would have, I said. I would have wanted to meet you years ago if I'd known. That night, I called Amy from my room to ask her about the bank account Mom had set up. I reported it to the bank as fraud, Amy said. They're investigating, and I'll probably get some of the money back. But honestly, Sarah, I don't care about the money. I care about the fact that for 6 years, I thought you were getting help with school and college expenses, and you weren't. How much money was it total? I asked. About $14,000 over 6 years. I know that's not a fortune, but it was everything I could spare. I worked extra shifts, took on additional cleaning jobs, gave up vacations and new clothes. I wanted to make sure you had opportunities I couldn't give you when you were little. The guilt was crushing. While Amy had been sacrificing to send me money, I'd been working part-time at a grocery store to buy my own school supplies and save for college. Amy, I'm so sorry. If I had known... Stop, she said gently. This isn't your fault. You were a child. Donna was the adult who made these choices. A few days later, Mom called and asked if she could take me to dinner. Dad said it was my choice, so I agreed. We went to our old favorite restaurant, the Italian place where we'd celebrated every birthday and achievement for years. You look good, Mom said as we waited for our food. Happy? I am, I think. Confused, but happy. I'm glad you're getting to know Amy. I really am. I studied her face, looking for signs of insincerity, but she seemed to mean it. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, she continued. About love not lying. You were right. Mom. No, let me finish. I convinced myself that I was protecting you, but I was really protecting myself. I was terrified that if you knew about Amy, you'd choose her over me. It wouldn't have been about choosing, I said. It would have been about having both of you. I see that now. And I see how selfish I was. Keeping you from knowing your heritage, your biological family, your brother. She wiped her eyes with her napkin. I'm seeing a therapist now. Someone who specializes in adoptive families. That's good. She's helping me understand that loving you means wanting what's best for you, even if that's hard for me. And what's best for you is knowing the truth about where you came from. Our food arrived, but neither of us ate much. We were too busy talking, really talking, for the first time in months. The money, Mom said eventually. I know what I did was wrong. I've been meeting with a lawyer about paying restitution to Amy. She's already reported it to the bank as fraud. Mom nodded. I know. I deserve whatever consequences come from that. Why did you do it, really? Not the surface reasons about protecting our family. Why did you take money from someone who was trying to help her daughter? Mom was quiet for a long time. Because I was jealous, she said finally. Jealous that she could have children naturally when I couldn't. Jealous that you were biologically hers when you weren't biologically mine. Jealous that even after giving you up, she got to be the good mother who sacrificed for you, while I was just the woman who happened to be there. It was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. But you were there, I said softly. You were there for everything. That matters too. Does it? After everything I've done? I thought about Amy's letters, about all the milestones she'd missed and imagined from afar. I thought about Mom's presence at every soccer game, every school play, every midnight fever and homework crisis. Yes, I said. It matters. You're both my mother, Mom. In different ways. She started crying again, but this time it seemed like relief, rather than desperation. I don't deserve forgiveness, she said. Maybe not, I said. But I'm going to forgive you anyway, because holding on to anger is exhausting. But things can't go back to the way they were. I'm going to have a relationship with Amy and Kevin, and you're going to have to be okay with that. I will be. I promise. The following Saturday, Amy brought Kevin to meet me. He was taller than I'd expected, already almost 6 feet at 15, but he had Amy's eyes and my stubborn chin. He was shy at first, hanging back while Amy and I hugged, but when Amy introduced us, his face broke into a grin that was pure sunshine. I can't believe you're real, he said. I mean, I knew you were real, but you're actually here. I can't believe you're real either, I said, and meant it. We spent the afternoon at the park, and Kevin told me about school, his friends, his plan to try out for varsity basketball next year. He showed me pictures on his phone of his latest art projects. He was incredibly talented, much better than I'd ever been at drawing. Mom talks about you all the time, he said as we walked around the duck pond. She has this whole scrapbook of newspaper clippings about your school, your honor roll announcements, anything she could find. It's kind of creepy, but also really sweet. She made a scrapbook about me? Oh yeah. She shows it to everyone. This is my daughter Sarah, he said, mimicking Amy's voice. She's on the honor roll and she works at a grocery store and she's so responsible. The thought of Amy following my achievements from a distance, proud of a daughter she couldn't contact, made my chest ache with a mixture of love and sadness. Kevin, I said, I'm sorry I wasn't around when you were little. I'm sorry you grew up without a sister. He shrugged, but I could see the emotion in his eyes. Wasn't your fault, but I'm glad we found each other now. Me too. That evening, Amy drove me home and walked me to the door. Dad answered when she knocked, and I watched them meet for the first time. You must be David, Amy said, extending her hand. Thank you for taking such good care of our daughter. She's an amazing kid, Dad said. You should be proud. I am. And I'm grateful to you and Donna for giving her opportunities I couldn't. It was a generous thing to say, and I could see Dad relax slightly. Would you like to come in for coffee? He asked. I should get Kevin home, but maybe another time. As Amy got back in her car, Dad put his arm around my shoulders. She seems like good people, he said. She is. You're lucky, Sarah. Not many people get to have two families who love them. The bank investigation took 3 months to resolve. In the end, Mom had to pay back $12,000 of the $14,000 Amy had sent over the years. The remaining $2,000 was considered processing fees and interest that couldn't be recovered. Mom took out a second mortgage on the house to pay the restitution, which became another point of contention between my parents. She destroyed our financial security to cover up a lie, Dad told me one evening as we made dinner together. I don't know how to come back from that. But despite his anger, I could see Dad struggling with the decision about their marriage. They'd been together for 20 years, and until this revelation, they'd been genuinely happy. Mom was going to therapy twice a week and had started attending a support group for adoptive parents. She was trying to change, but whether it was too little too late remained to be seen. The hardest part was watching them try to figure out how to coexist during my senior year. Mom had moved back into the house but was sleeping in the guest room. They were polite to each other, but the easy intimacy they'd shared my entire life was gone. Dinners were stilted affairs where we talked about safe topics like school and the weather, avoiding the landmines of trust and forgiveness. Amy, meanwhile, had become a steady presence in my life. We met for lunch every Tuesday after school, and she started coming to some of my soccer games. The first time she showed up on the sidelines, Mom was already there, and I held my breath waiting to see what would happen. They sat on opposite sides of the field and didn't speak, but they both cheered when I scored a goal. It wasn't friendship, but it wasn't war either. Progress, I told myself. Kevin started hanging out with us more too. He was funny and easy to be around, and I found myself looking forward to the brother relationship I'd never had. He taught me to play video games I'd never been interested in before, and I helped him with his college application essays. It felt natural in a way that surprised me. It's weird, I told Amy one Tuesday over lunch. I spent my whole life being an only child, and now I can't imagine not having Kevin as a brother. You two are more alike than you know, Amy said, smiling. Same stubborn streak, same sense of humor, same way of tilting your head when you're thinking hard about something. Is it weird for you? Having both of us together after all these years? Amy considered the question seriously. It's wonderful and heartbreaking at the same time. Wonderful because I get to see you interact with your brother, heartbreaking because I realize how much I missed. All the sibling fights and inside jokes and shared experiences that make you two who you are. We can make new shared experiences, I said. We can. And we are. One of those new experiences was Amy teaching me to cook traditional Chinese dishes. Every Sunday, I'd go to her apartment and we'd spend hours in her tiny kitchen, learning recipes that had been passed down from my grandmother. The first time I successfully made dumplings without them falling apart, Amy cried with pride. Your grandmother would have loved teaching you this, she said, wiping her eyes. She always said food was how we show love in our family. I was learning so much about my heritage that I'd never known. About the Mid-Autumn Festival and the significance of red envelopes at New Year. About my great-grandfather who had been a scholar in Taiwan, and my great-grandmother, who had been known for her incredible embroidery. About family traditions and cultural values that felt both foreign and familiar. I wish I had learned this stuff when I was little, I said one Sunday as we made spring rolls together. You're learning it now, Amy said. That's what matters. But it was Mom who surprised me the most during this period. One evening in late November, she knocked on my bedroom door holding a wrapped package. What's this? I asked. Open it. Inside was a book titled Understanding Chinese Culture and Traditions, and a beginner's Mandarin workbook. I thought maybe, if you're going to learn about your heritage, I should learn too, she said awkwardly. I want to understand where you come from, all of where you come from. It was such a small gesture, but it felt huge. After 18 years of denying my Chinese heritage existed, Mom was finally acknowledging it. Thank you, I said, and meant it. I also. She hesitated, then pulled out her phone. I've been researching support groups for adoptive families dealing with reunion situations. I found one that meets on Thursday nights. I was wondering if maybe you'd come with me sometime. I stared at her. You want to go to a support group? I want to learn how to do this right. How to support your relationship with Amy without feeling threatened. How to be the mother you need me to be in this new reality. It was the most mature thing Mom had said since this whole situation started. Okay, I said. I'll come with you. The support group met in the basement of a community center downtown. There were about 15 people there the night Mom and I attended, adoptive parents, birth parents, and adult adoptees like me. Everyone had a different story, but the themes were similar: secrets, lies, complicated emotions, and the challenge of building relationships across years of separation. One woman, whose daughter had found her through social media at age 25, talked about the guilt of missing her daughter's entire childhood. A man whose son had sought him out at 30 spoke about the challenge of building a father-son relationship with an adult. An adoptive mother whose teenage son was in reunion with his birth family talked about feeling replaced and unimportant. The hardest part, the adoptive mother said, is realizing that love isn't finite. My son having a relationship with his birth parents doesn't diminish his love for me, but it feels like it does sometimes. I looked at Mom and saw tears in her eyes. When it came time for sharing, Mom raised her hand hesitantly. "I'm Donna," she said. "I hid my daughter's adoption from her for 18 years. I also intercepted money and contact from her birth mother during that time." The room was very quiet. "I told myself I was protecting her," Mom continued, "but really I was protecting myself from having to share her. I was so afraid that if she knew about Amy, she'd choose Amy over me. But what I've learned is that I never gave Sarah the chance to choose both of us." After the meeting, Mom and I went for coffee at an all-night diner. "How did that feel?" I asked. "Terrifying. But also, relieving. Like I finally admitted out loud what I've been carrying around for years." "Are you going to keep going to the meetings?" "I think I need to. I have a lot to learn about how to handle this situation better." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking bad coffee and eating pie that was probably left over from the previous day. "Mom," I said finally, "I need you to know something. Having Amy in my life doesn't make me love you less, but hiding her from me did make me trust you less." She nodded, tears in her eyes again. "I understand. And I'm going to spend however long it takes earning that trust back." Christmas was complicated that year. Amy invited me to spend Christmas Eve with her and Kevin, which was their family tradition. Mom and Dad invited me to Christmas Day dinner, which had always been our tradition. I felt pulled in multiple directions, wanting to honor both families without hurting anyone's feelings. In the end, we worked out a compromise. Christmas Eve with Amy and Kevin, Christmas morning opening presents with Mom and Dad, and Christmas dinner at our house with everyone invited. I wasn't sure how it would work, having both families together for the first time since this all began. But when Christmas Day arrived, Amy showed up with a beautiful flower arrangement and a willingness to be gracious. Mom had spent all morning cooking and cleaning, clearly nervous about hosting Amy in our home. Kevin broke the ice by complimenting Mom on the Christmas tree decorations, which led to her showing him our collection of ornaments from my childhood. Soon they were looking through photo albums together, with Kevin asking questions about my school years, and Mom sharing embarrassing stories about my various phases. Amy and Dad bonded over their mutual concern about my college choices, discussing the merits of different universities and financial aid options. Watching them work together to plan my future was surreal but wonderful. The most moving moment came when Amy pulled out a wrapped gift for Mom. "You didn't need to," Mom started. "I wanted to," Amy said. "You've taken care of our daughter for 18 years. That deserves recognition." Inside was a beautiful photo album filled with pictures of me that Amy had somehow obtained. School photos, soccer team pictures, honor roll ceremonies. Pictures Amy had never seen but had managed to collect through what must have been considerable effort. "I thought you might like to have copies," Amy said softly. "Since you were there for all of these moments." Mom started crying as she flipped through the pages. "How did you get these?" "The internet is amazing. School websites, newspaper archives, team rosters. I may have missed these moments, but I could still celebrate them from afar." It was a gesture of such generosity that it left everyone a little emotional. Here was Amy, acknowledging Mom's role in my life and celebrating it, even after everything Mom had done. "Thank you," Mom whispered. "This means more than you know." "We're both Sarah's mothers," Amy said. "We both love her. That makes us connected, whether we like it or not." By the time everyone left that evening, something had shifted. The tension that had defined our family for months had eased into something more manageable. We were still figuring out how to be a blended family across two households, but we were figuring it out together. In January, I started my second semester of senior year with a clearer sense of who I was and where I came from. I was Sarah Morrison Bell Chen, daughter of two mothers, sister to Kevin, raised by David and Donna, but born to Amy. It was complicated, but it was honest. Mom and Dad started couples counseling in February. I didn't know if their marriage would survive, but I could see them both trying to rebuild trust and communication. Mom had learned to accept my relationship with Amy, and Dad was learning to forgive 18 years of deception. It was slow work, but it was work they were both committed to. Amy used part of the restitution money to establish a small scholarship fund at my high school for students from single-parent households. She called it the Second Chances Scholarship, and I helped her write the application criteria. Sometimes families don't work out the way we planned, Amy said as we worked on the scholarship guidelines. But that doesn't mean we stop believing in the power of education and opportunity to change lives. Kevin was accepted to 3 different colleges with significant financial aid packages. Amy was so proud she couldn't stop bragging to everyone at the daycare where she worked. Watching her celebrate her son's achievements made me realize how much she'd missed not being able to brag about mine over the years. "I'm going to be insufferable when you graduate," she warned me one Tuesday over lunch. 18 years of backed-up maternal pride is going to come pouring out. "I'm looking forward to it," I said, and meant it. As graduation approached, both families came together to celebrate. Amy and Kevin sat with Mom and Dad at the ceremony, cheering embarrassingly loudly when my name was called. At the graduation party afterward, I watched Amy and Mom work together in the kitchen, preparing food and cleaning up, falling into an easy rhythm that suggested they might actually become friends someday. "Look at that," Dad said, following my gaze. 6 months ago I would never have imagined those two working together. "People can change," I said. "Yeah," he said, putting his arm around my shoulders. "They can." I started college in the fall with both sets of parents helping me move into my dorm. Amy brought homemade dumplings and a care package filled with Chinese tea and traditional herbs for when I got sick. Mom brought everything else I could possibly need, plus several things I definitely didn't need, along with enough tears to flood the parking lot. "I'm proud of you," Amy told me as we hugged goodbye. "And I'm grateful for every day we've had together since we found each other." "I'm proud of you too," I said. "For never giving up, for working so hard to send me money, for raising Kevin, for being so gracious with Mom. You're amazing." Mom's goodbye was harder, weighted with 18 years of shared history, and the knowledge that I was growing up and moving away. "I know I made mistakes," she said through her tears. "But I need you to know that every choice I made came from love, even the wrong ones." "I know," I said. "And I love you too, Mom. Both of you." "Both of us," she repeated, and for the first time, she seemed to mean it without reservation. As I watched both families drive away from my dorm, I reflected on the journey that had brought us all here. It had started with a simple question about an allowance, and had ended with a complicated but beautiful expansion of what family could mean. I thought about the support group Mom and I had attended, and the adoptive mother who'd said love wasn't finite. She was right. Learning to love Amy and Kevin didn't diminish my love for Mom and Dad. It multiplied it, creating a network of relationships that was messier and more complex than the nuclear family I'd grown up believing I belonged to, but also richer and more honest. There were still challenges ahead. Mom and Dad were still working through their marital issues, and I was still learning to navigate having two families with different traditions and expectations. But we were doing it together, with honesty instead of secrets, with inclusion instead of competition. I had learned that families can be broken and rebuilt, that trust can be lost and earned back, that love can be complicated and still be real. I had learned that sometimes the most painful truths lead to the most beautiful possibilities. And I had learned that I was exactly where I belonged, not choosing between two families, but belonging fully to both. My grandma disowned us the day I was born. 16 years later, she returned, broke, begging for shelter. Dad's reply left her speechless. While my mother was physically in labor with me, my grandma on my father's side declared, "I'm cutting you both out of my life. My other son's wife is wealthy and can fund my retirement. Your wife is a slow food stamp collector with horrible hair." Dad's jaws dropped, and his jaw clenched in rage. "Get the hell out if you're going to be racist to my wife." My grandma backed off, clearly outraged. "It's not racist. It's the truth. Your brother's wife is the best thing that's happened to us." She stared at my father as if he were a foolish child when he claimed that finding true love was the best thing that had occurred. "Good luck with your real love, don't come crawling back when she's framed you for a theft you didn't commit." She exited the delivery room, immediately buying airplane tickets with her other daughter-in-law's credit cards. I wasn't there to witness it, but my grandmother's actions sparked a fire within my parents. Mom pushed herself into teaching when I was a little older, and Dad worked extra shifts at the warehouse. When I was 7, Mom and Dad had saved enough money to start an after-school program. Mom tutored, while Dad taught life skills, such as car repair and DIY insulation for walls. Soon, 45 children had shown up. Meanwhile, my grandmother was living with my uncle and his wife Clara, traveling on vacation, spending her money, and purchasing new cars simply because she could. However, neither family was aware of this. Clara had been in the delivery room when I was born. She'd stood silently in the doorway, and hearing her mother-in-law refer to a newborn baby as a disgrace moved something inside her. That's when she learned about my father's achievements. By this point, the program had a second location. My parents were making enough money to relocate to a house with a pool and take vacations where I would have my own hotel room. That was when Clara made her move. "Market's been rough lately. We're losing a lot," she casually said during a smaller than usual family dinner. Grandma's eyes quickly widened. Clara quickly depleted the funds on my grandmother's card, causing it to decrease. Then grandmother's king-size bed was replaced with a single. Then came the big announcement. Clara arrived to lunch crying. "The lawyers say my trust fund could be frozen for years. We'll lose everything," my grandmother exclaimed. "Are you seriously telling me you're going broke?" Clara said, nodding as if it were true. Over the next 3 weeks, grandmother's expensive garments were auctioned to offset stock losses. Her $30 coffee was replaced with instant, and Clara and Richie even moved into an apartment to make the financial loss appear more realistic. That's when my granny snapped. "I think I need some space from you two while you figure things out financially. It's just so stressful for me." And with that, she stopped coming to dinners. She began avoiding Clara's calls, all for money that was never actually lost. That was when she realized she had another son. I was 16 years old when she came up at our door. Dad was at work, while Mom was at home. I'll never forget my grandmother's expression when she saw our house. The mental math was visible. The pool, the 2 vehicles, and my MacBook on the counter. "I've been thinking about family lately," she explained, clutching her counterfeit designer purse. "I realize I may have been hasty in the past." Mom, who is better than anyone deserves, asked her in for coffee. My grandmother sat in our kitchen, looking at our vacation photos, the accolades from the after-school program, and the life we'd established without her. "I always knew you two would make something of yourselves," she'd said. "I just wanted to give you space to grow." She burst into tears about being abandoned by both sons, feeling lonely, and how families should stick together. Then came the request. "I just need a little help getting back on my feet. Maybe I could stay in your guest room, just temporarily." Dad arrived home during the concert. He listened. Then he spoke calmly. "You called my baby a disgrace in the delivery room while my wife was still bleeding." I was upset. "I didn't mean—" "You meant every word," he shouted. "And you know how Clara is supposedly going broke?" Grandmother's ears perked up. "How do you know that?" she inquired. My father just smirked. "How do you know that?" "Brothers talk, Mom," he finally responded. He moved around, clearly relishing her panic. "You are aware that Clara's trust fund was never frozen." Grandmother's jaw dropped. "What do you mean?" she inquired, afraid to hear the answer. "Clara is a smart woman, Mom. She knows you only loved her money, so she put you to the test." My granny turned white. "That's impossible," she said, but she didn't believe herself. "Clara can buy you a Bentley at the snap of a finger. But now she never will, and you'll never see a cent off me either. Now get out of my house." Grandma has become desperate. "Please, I'm your mother. You can't just—" "You're right. I can't just abandon family." Dad stood up. "But I can give you exactly what you gave us, which is nothing." He shooed her out. And now comes the finest part. When my grandmother called my uncle from our driveway, sobbing because we had rejected her, he interrupted her. "You know, Mom, my marriage has been better since you left. Clara and I aren't fighting, and we enjoy cheap TV dinners without you nagging us over $120 wine bottles. You're not welcome back." Her jaw fell. She returned inside, begging. "Please, I'll go homeless if you don't take me in." Mom and Dad exchanged glances, knowing what she was saying was true. Their gazes locked for what seemed like an eternity, as grandmother stood between them, shivering. Mom's face had that teacher expression she gets when a child in the program needs assistance, but has also done something wrong. Dad's jaw remained stiff, but his eyes softened somewhat as he gazed at Mom. Finally, Mom spoke quietly but firmly, insisting that they discuss things alone first. Grandmother's sobbing grew louder, and she clutched Dad's arm, asking them not to abandon her on the street like a homeless person. Dad drew his arm back and proceeded to the front door, opening it wide. He instructed her to wait in her car while they figured things out. She began screaming about being his mother, but Dad simply pointed to the door. Grandmother went out, appearing smaller than I'd ever seen her, and we all gathered around the living room window to watch. She sat in her beat-up automobile, which was nothing like the luxury vehicle she used to drive with Uncle and Clara. Mom began pacing around the kitchen, running her hands through her hair repeatedly. She kept halting at the counter and then starting to walk again, as if she wasn't sure what to do. Dad followed her with his eyes, reminding her of how her grandmother had called her lazy and worthless when I was born. Mom's hands clenched, but she kept pacing, and I could tell she was warring with herself. Dad claimed grandmother preferred money over us, and only returned when the money was gone. Mom came to a halt and glanced at the ground, breathing heavily. I finally spoke up from where I was standing near the steps. I told them that our after-school program had 45 families that trusted us. What would happen if word got out that we let Dad's mother go homeless? Mom came to a halt and glanced at me, astonished. She admits to thinking the same thing about our reputation. Dad grabbed his phone and suggested they call Uncle first to see if he had changed his mind. Uncle answered the second call, and his voice was as frigid as ice when Dad narrated the issue. Uncle stated that his marriage with Clara had never been better since grandmother left. He was not going to sacrifice his wife's happiness for someone who simply cared about money. Dad turned it on speaker, and we heard Clara's voice in the background, wondering who it was. She took the phone and sprung a major surprise on us. Clara offered to pay for a motel stay for a few nights, but only through someone else. She would have no direct contact with her grandmother at all. She suggested that we hire a social worker to handle things, so there would be no family conflict. Dad thanked her and hung up, then walked outside to see grandmother still sitting in her car. We observed from the window as he leaned down to speak through her window. She began screaming loudly enough that we could hear it inside, but Dad interrupted her with sharp hand movements. He told her she couldn't remain here, but they'd work something out for tonight. Grandmother's face turned hot and she yelled something about desertion. Dad yelled back that she abandoned us first, literally as I was being born. He turned and walked back inside, leaving her sitting there, mouth open. Mom opened her laptop and began searching for a cheap motel in the vicinity. She discovered one approximately 10 minutes away that had good reviews and was reasonably priced. Dad called and booked a 3-night stay with Mom's credit card. He issued strong orders that no hotel charges should be added to the bill. The desk clerk looked perplexed, but consented to record it in their system. Dad went back outside and delivered the room key card to grandmother via the window. She accepted it without saying thank you, and drove away, mumbling something we couldn't hear. That night was tough for all of us. I kept tossing and turning, reflecting on all that had transpired. Around midnight, I heard Mom and Dad conversing quietly in their room down the hall. Mom kept telling us that we couldn't become like grandmothers by putting money and fame above family. Dad's voice was difficult to hear, but he sounded furious and exhausted. Mom explained that even toxic families were still family, and we needed to strike a balance. Their voices continued for at least an hour before quieting down. When I came down for breakfast the next morning, Mom had already been up making calls. She had the phone book open for government services and was taking notes on a yellow pad. After 3 transfers, she was connected to someone from County Social Services. The woman on the phone introduced herself as Marissa McCarthy and explained that she specialized in elder care resources. Mom addressed our position without delving into all of the unpleasant details. Marissa sounded understanding, saying that these family circumstances were more prevalent than people realized. She agreed to meet with us that afternoon to talk about housing help alternatives. Mom thanked her and hung up, clearly relieved to get some professional aid. Dad came down looking exhausted, with black circles under his eyes. He poured coffee and sat at the table, staring at nothing, while Mom told him about the social worker meeting. I took some cereal and noticed my parents appearing older than they had ever looked before. Around lunchtime, our neighbor sent Mom a text, causing her phone to ring on the counter. Mom snatched it up and her face paled as she read it. She gave Dad the message concerning grandmother's beat-up automobile that had been parked on our block since sunrise, with someone sleeping inside. Mom's hand began to shake, and she had to put the phone down before dropping it. Dad took his keys and walked to the door without saying anything. I observed from the window as he strolled down the street toward the aging vehicle parked 3 homes away. He banged on the glass, and grandmother sat up, puzzled and unkempt. They talked for a minute before Dad began swinging his arms about, agitated. He returned inside and slammed the door hard enough to rattle the portraits on the wall. Grandmother had not utilized any of the 3 motel nights we had purchased for, because she preferred to store them for when things went really terrible. Dad started pacing around the kitchen, claiming that this was exactly the type of manipulation she used. Mom told him that he could not force her to use the room if she did not want to. We still had to meet with Marissa that afternoon, so Mom cooked sandwiches that nobody ate. The drive to the county office felt longer than usual since everyone remained quiet. Marissa's office had posters on senior care and a large desk filled in documents. She explained that senior residences has waiting lists ranging from 6 months to a year long. The emergency shelters were overcrowded with persons suffering from mental illnesses, making it dangerous for older ladies. She took out a brochure for a rooming house on Maple Street that had an opening right now. The property required $800 for the deposit and first month, but it was tidy and had a manager on site. Dad's face turned scarlet as he heard the price, and he began to complain. Mom kept gazing at the photos of the modest rooms with shared bathrooms and a communal kitchen. Marissa stated that this was one of the best options accessible to someone in the grandmother's predicament. We thanked her and went with the pamphlet and a few benefit forms. That evening, Mom and Dad had their greatest dispute in years over what to do next. Dad insisted his mother made her decisions when she chose money over family 15 years ago. Mom was concerned about setting a bad example by allowing their family to become homeless. Their voices became more louder, till I couldn't take it anymore. Maybe Uncle would pay half if we asked him the right way, I whispered from the doorway. My parents both paused and glanced at me, as if they had forgotten I was at home. Dad contacted Uncle straight away, and put him on speaker so that we could all hear. Uncle listened to the entire event, and then went silent for a long period. He ultimately agreed to pay half, but only if the money went directly to the rooming house. Clara called and explained that Granny had to agree to remain away, except in extreme cases. She wanted everything in writing through Marissa to avoid any confusion later. Uncle explained that grandmother had already burnt out their goodwill, and this was the exact last thing they'd do. Marissa spent 2 days quietly working on the paperwork for the rooming home arrangement. Then, around 4:30 p.m. on Thursday, my phone began to fill up with texts from program participants. Grandmother had arrived during pickup time and was making a big deal in the parking lot. Mom and Dad rushed over, but I stayed at home, trying not to panic about what was occurring. When they arrived, Grandmother was telling a group of parents about how her own family refused to help her. Several parents appeared to be uneasy, and one mother approached Mom to inquire about her well-being. Dad had to forcibly lead Grandmother out from the crowd, as everyone watched and muttered. Some of the students were staring, and I knew it would be all over the school tomorrow. That night, the phone rang 3 times, with parents inquiring about the situation at pickup. 2 families mentioned they were considering withdrawing their children if there was family strife influencing the curriculum. Mom spent an hour on each conversation, attempting to explain without disclosing too many personal details. The 3rd family was more sympathetic, but they still had reservations about the program's environmental impact. Dad looked discouraged as he listened to Mom's attempt to restore their reputation over the phone. The next morning, Mom was cooking coffee when the phone rang again before 7 a.m. Colin from the local paper presented himself and explained that he had heard of an incident at the after-school program. He asked if we wanted to make a statement about the incident with the elderly woman in the parking lot. Mom's face turned white, and she began stammering about needing to call him back later. Dad took the phone and almost began telling Colin everything about his grandmother's previous actions and why she deserved this. I went in between them and seized the phone before Dad said anything we'd regret. Our family is working through some challenges while maintaining healthy boundaries, I said with humor. He appeared pleased with it, and even highlighted his own mother-in-law, who caused similar troubles for his family. Mom relaxed slightly when Colin mentioned that he realized how complicated and personal family matters can be. He thanked us for the statement, and said he'd make a brief remark without going into depth. After he hung up, we all gathered in the kitchen, tired despite the fact that the day had only just begun. Marissa called an hour later, saying she had organized a meeting with everyone, including Grandmother, for the afternoon. The purpose of the conference was to establish all of the rooming house's boundaries and expectations for the future. We arrived in the conference room at 2 o'clock and waited in uncomfortable silence. Grandmother arrived around 3:15, stating she got lost finding the building. Dad pointed out that she had lived in this town for 40 years, and the county building had not moved. Grandmother simply shrugged and sat down, without apologizing for wasting everyone's time waiting for her. Marissa took out a folder and began spreading papers across the table, as Grandmother stared with narrowed eyes. The papers had numbers and lists, which caused Grandmother to lean forward, despite her attempts to appear uninterested. Dad drummed his fingers on the table while Marissa sorted everything into neat piles. Mom sat with her hands folded, watching the grandmother's expression shift as she realized this was not going to be easy. Marissa cleared her throat and began discussing her alternatives, but her grandmother kept interrupting with comments about how difficult life had been. She raised Dad and Uncle alone after their father departed, which caused Dad's cheeks flush hot. He slammed his hand on the table, startling everyone, and reminded her how much her parents had helped her. Grandmother tried to disagree, but Dad insisted that she prioritized money over family, not the other way around. His voice grew louder as he recounted all the times she had chosen fortune over relationships. Marissa raised her hand to quiet things down before returning to explaining the many housing alternatives available. She showed Granny photos of a rooming house with an openness, shared bathrooms, and a communal kitchen. The property required 3 months' payment up ahead, which would provide Granny time to file for welfare and possibly find work. When Marissa discussed working, her grandmother's face twisted, and she began to yell about being too old for jobs. Marissa simply pointed to the second choice, a homeless shelter with bunk beds and no privacy at all. Grandmother went silent quickly after seeing those shelter photographs of people sleeping on cots lined up in rows. When Marissa's phone rang, she answered and put it on speaker without first asking anyone. Clara spoke clearly, stating that she had been listening to Marissa's updates all along. She offered to pay for the rooming house, but only if grandmother agreed to one additional non-negotiable condition. Grandmother had to attend weekly budgeting seminars at the senior center beginning immediately, with no exceptions. Grandmother's face turned from pale to blazing red as she realized Clara was in control of everything from behind the scenes. She opened her mouth to refuse, but then looked at the shelter photos again before closing it without saying anything. Marissa drew up the agreement right there, including all of the terms, as we all saw grandmother sign it with shaky hands. 3 days later, we traveled to the rooming house with the grandmother's belongings packed in rubbish bags and 2 old suitcases. The building appeared decent from the outside, but the inside smelled like cabbage and cleaning products mixed together. Grandmother moaned the entire way up the stairs about her hip and how loose the railing was. Her room was modest, with a single bed against one wall and an old dresser. She began complaining about the common bathroom down the hall and how the window faced a brick wall. Mom kept biting her lip, trying not to say anything, while Dad kept bringing suitcases up. He reminded his mother that Clara had given her a king-size bed, which she had chosen to leave behind. After a minute of silence, grandmother began grumbling about the tiny mattress and rough sheets. We left her there unpacking and ranting about ungrateful children, while other residents observed from their entrances. The first week passed without touch, which seemed strange but also kind of calm for everyone. Then Dad's phone started ringing at work, and grandmother called during his shifts to complain about everything. She complained about the food, the noise, the other residents, and the temperature of her room. After the 6th call in 2 days, his boss called him aside and warned him not to make personal calls during work hours. Dad arrived home stressed and snapping at everyone, which was not typical of him prior to this incident. With all of the turmoil, I started having difficulties focusing at school, and my grades dropped for the first time in my life. My counselor, Daniel Price, spotted me spacing out in class and invited me to remain after 1 day. He sat opposite from me and inquired about what was going on without pressing too hard for details. I told him about the family issue, and he helped me understand that adult problems were not my responsibility to solve. He taught me various stress reduction tactics, such as keeping a notebook and going for walks when things were overwhelming. He reminded me that I could not control what grown-ups did, but I could control how I reacted to it. Meanwhile, grandmother was making trouble at the rooming house by grabbing extra food from the shared kitchen at night. Other tenants began complaining when their labeled groceries were missing, and tensions rose quickly. The manager called Marissa and informed her that grandmother had been caught red-handed with someone else's yogurt and sandwich in her room. Marissa had to drive over and mediate, as grandmother swore she had purchased those items herself, despite the fact that they bore someone else's name. The management warned that one more violation would result in eviction, and grandmother would have to find another place to live. Officer Hayes arrived at our door on tenant night, 2 weeks after we moved in his patrol cruiser with Granny. She'd been discovered trying to sleep on a park bench after being tossed out of her rooming house for 3 days. Grandmother admitted, amid sobs, that another resident had accused her of stealing money from their room throughout the night. The rooming house had a zero-tolerance policy for stealing, so they'd forced her leave while they looked into what had happened. Officer Hayes stated he couldn't keep taking her to the park, so we needed to work something out quickly. Dad contacted Marissa even though it was late, and she began making calls to find out what had happened. The investigation revealed that grandmother had not taken any money, but had been repeating sorrowful stories to other residents about her wealthy family abandoning her. She was attempting to solicit pity money from those who barely had anything, which resulted in the bogus accusation. The resident who accused her felt awful, but also upset about being duped into nearly giving grandmother $20. The rooming house decided to allow her back, but they warned her not to manipulate other residents for money or food. Marissa had to explain to her grandmother that this was her final chance, and any further problems meant she'd be out permanently. Mom couldn't sleep that night, so we decided we needed to help without enabling grandmother's conduct or overstepping our limits. She devised a plan to drop off goods once a week, subject to certain rules. Grandmother had to agree not to make any comments about our family or ask for anything other than what we brought. Mom wrote the guidelines and had Marissa deliver them so there would be no face-to-face confrontations. On the first delivery day, Mom packed basic goods such as bread and peanut butter and drove to the rooming home alone. She did not enter the room and instead left the bags with her grandmother's name on them at the front desk. Grandmother came down and accepted the luggage without saying anything, possibly the first time she had ever remained silent. Colin from the local paper contacted the following week to inquire about writing a feature on elder care and family boundaries. He had heard about our situation through the community grapevine and wanted to interview us on dealing with problematic family relationships. Mom and Dad agreed to talk, but only if he kept our identities anonymous in the story. Colin sat at our kitchen table for 3 hours, taking notes while Mom explained how we were trying to help without encouraging bad conduct. The piece was published on Sunday under the title, "When Love Means Setting Limits," and it utilized instances that anyone who knew us would recognize right away. My phone exploded with texts from students who realized it was about us. Instead of the judgment we expected, numerous parents from the after-school program contacted us with their own tales and resources. One mother dropped off a folder with senior services material she had gathered while dealing with her own mother-in-law. Another family volunteered to connect us with an elder law specialist. The response was overwhelming in the best way. That following week, Uncle contacted Dad around 2 a.m., crying so hard he could scarcely speak. He acknowledged to discreetly sending grandmother money when she called, stating she was starving. Clara had discovered the bank withdrawals and chastised him for breaking their agreement. Uncle stated that grandmother had called him sobbing because the rooming house food was making her sick, and she hadn't eaten in 3 days. He had driven over with $200 cash without informing Clara. When Clara found out what had happened, she packed her bags and went to live with her sister. Uncle was devastated and urged Dad to speak to her. Dad drove to Clara's sister's place the next morning and discovered her sitting on the porch with red eyes. She was not upset about the money, but about the lying and going behind her back despite everything they had agreed on. It took Uncle showing up with flowers and a written commitment to never hide financial decisions again before she would consider returning home. They spent the next month in couples counseling, working with the trust difficulties that grandmother had caused between them. Meanwhile, Marissa had been working to enroll grandmother in the senior center food program. The center provided cooked lunches 5 days a week and maintained a food pantry on weekends. Grandmother qualified based on her salary and could eat for free. The first day, she arrived 40 minutes late, claiming she got lost, despite the fact that the center was 3 blocks from her rooming house. She sat at a table with 3 other women and quickly began telling them about how her wealthy sons abandoned her. One woman confronted her, claiming she'd heard Granny had family send off groceries every week. Grandmother adjusted her statement to claim that the groceries were primarily expired food that they did not desire. However, over the course of several weeks, she began to form friendships with a group that played cards after lunch. Marissa claimed that her grandmother showed up on a frequent basis and even helped put up chairs on occasion. A month into my new schedule, I was doing homework when Dad's phone phoned with a number he did not know. The hospital called to report that grandmother had fallen at the rooming house and was treated for a damaged wrist and bruised ribs. The second resident stated that she had been reaching for something on a high shelf and lost her balance. Dad sat at the kitchen table for 20 minutes, staring at his phone, before choosing what to do. He phoned Mom at the after-school program, and they agreed to visit but with tight rules. They were only going to stay for 30 minutes, so I had to come in as a buffer. We discovered grandmother in a hospital bed, appearing smaller than I had ever seen her, with her wrist bound and an IV in her arm. She burst into tears the moment she saw us, telling us how afraid she had been and how none of the nurses would listen to her. Mom inquired with the nurses, who informed her that grandmother had requested a private room and refused the authorized pain medication in favor of something stronger. Dad firmly told her that we were there to make sure she was okay, but that we would not be taking her home with us. Grandmother tried to argue she couldn't return to the rooming house due to her injuries, but the doctor walked in and said she'd be okay with some physical treatment. Marissa worked with Medicare to have the therapy reimbursed, and she arranged for medical transportation to take grandmother to her sessions. The doctor also recommended a walker, which caused grandmother's face flush scarlet. She maintained she didn't need it, and that it would make her appear old. Dad actually chuckled at her, not mockingly, but genuinely amused that she was concerned about appearances despite living in a rooming house. The walker proved to be required because grandmother's balance was poorer than she realized. 3 families who had threatened to leave our after-school program following the scene made by grandmother decided to stay after hearing how we were addressing the situation. One mother took Mom aside and told her how her mother-in-law had lived with them for 2 years, nearly destroying her marriage. She stated witnessing us establish boundaries while also meeting grandmother's basic needs gave her hope that families might survive such situations. The program grew stronger as parents helped each other through tough family dynamics. Marissa enrolled grandmother in mandatory budgeting seminars at the senior center as part of her aid obligations. The grandmother moaned during the first session, but the instructor contacted later to say she had actually engaged and even helped another attendee figure out percentages. By the 3rd week, grandmother was arriving early and making friends with a man who was learning how to manage his Social Security benefits. 2 months into the arrangement, Officer Hayes knocked on our door, embarrassed. He had caught Granny digging through our garbage cans at 5 a.m., hunting for bottles to recycle. She informed him that we had thrown away precious recyclables and that she needed the money for medicine. Dad's face became white, as Officer Hayes stated that he needed to issue an official warning for trespassing. We walked outside to find grandmother seated in the patrol car, holding a garbage bag full of cans. Dad understood she was truly dealing with poverty for the first time after years of recklessly wasting other people's money. Officer Hayes recommended that if we wanted to help without encouraging trespassing, we placed our recycling directly in the rooming house bins. As the 3-month rooming house payment deadline approached, we scheduled a family gathering in a neutral place. Uncle and Clara arrived together, their first appearance since the money incident. We met in a downtown coffee shop where grandmother couldn't accidentally show up. Clara astonished everyone when she offered to continue paying for the rooming house if grandmother met certain requirements. She had to continue attending budgeting classes, stop defrauding other residents of money, and agree to monthly check-ins with Marissa. Uncle emphasized that any transgression will result in the immediate cessation of support. Dad suggested that we put everything in writing this time to prevent future misunderstandings. Something happened that neither of us expected. Grandmother's knees buckled, and she slumped on our doorstep, wailing more than I'd ever seen anyone cry. Not artificial tears as previously, but true body-shaking sobs that made her entire figure shake. She grasped the porch railing and hauled herself up to look at Dad, her face flushed and blotchy. "I'm scared," she exclaimed between gasps. "I've never had to worry about money before, and I don't know what to do." Dad's expression shifted somewhat, and his jaw unclenched slightly. Mom placed her hand on his arm, and they engaged in one of those silent chats that married couples have. Finally, Mom walked inside and returned with Marissa's business card. She handed it to grandmother, explaining that Marissa might assist her in applying for senior housing and other perks. Grandmother accepted the card with trembling hands and murmured, "Thank you," which was perhaps the first sincere thank you she'd expressed in years. Over the next 2 weeks, Marissa and grandmother worked together to complete applications for every senior living community in the county. The waiting lists were all 4 to 6 months lengthy, but the rooming house manager agreed to keep her on a month-to-month basis as long as the payments continued and she ceased causing problems for the other residents. Meanwhile at school, Daniel noticed I was difficult to concentrate and invited me to stay after class. He helped me get started on my college application essays, one of which was about how to set boundaries with toxic family members. He reviewed my first draft and informed me that my ability to manage such a difficult issue at my age demonstrated true maturity. I worked on that essay for weeks, writing about how my parents created something out of nothing, while my grandmother prioritized money over family. Daniel helped me modify it into something that reflected growth without seeming bitter. Around the same time, Granny began visiting the senior center more frequently. The organizer there required assistance in the thrift shop 2 days per week, simply sorting contributions and pricing stuff. It only paid a little stipend but gave grandmother something to do other than moan. She still muttered that the labor was beneath her, but she arrived on time and completed the task. One afternoon, when I was assisting Mom at the after-school program, 5 new families arrived to register their children. One of the mothers approached Mom and said she had heard about how we handled the situation with my grandmother, maintaining boundaries while ensuring her basic needs were satisfied. She stated it motivated her to handle her own problematic mother-in-law in a healthier manner. Mom's eyes welled up and she had to take a brief break to use the restroom. After that, the program continued to grow, and we had to hire another part-time aide to keep up with all of the additional youngsters. Uncle contacted Dad more frequently, and they began meeting for coffee every week at the downtown cafe. They established a rule that they couldn't discuss grandmother during these sessions, only catch up on work and life. Dad returned home after these meetings looking lighter, as if a weight he'd been carrying for years had finally been lifted. Uncle informed Dad that he and Clara had begun visiting a couples therapist to address the harm grandmother's deception had caused in their marriage. Clara had forgiven him for giving grandmother money behind her back, but they both wanted to make sure they communicated more effectively moving forward. The therapist assisted them in establishing new financial and family standards. 4 months passed with grandmother residing at the rooming home, going to her thrift shop work, and participating in senior center events. Then Marissa called to say that grandmother had been approved for a subsidized senior apartment. The rent would be based on her little Social Security payment, and she could move in the next week. Despite everything, we all came to assist her relocate. Dad rented a tiny truck. Uncle brought boxes, and Clara came to assist pack. Grandmother didn't thank anyone explicitly, but she also didn't complain. She merely quietly packed her few possessions and led us to load them into the truck. The senior housing building was rather lovely, with a community area and weekly programs. As we hauled boxes up to her second-floor home, I observed several occupants staring through their entrances. One woman about the grandmother's age introduced herself and explained that she too had a complex relationship with her children. Within a week, grandmother and this woman were playing cards in the communal room every afternoon, grumbling about their respective families. Dad stated that it was probably therapeutic for everyone concerned. A few weeks after grandmother moved in, the senior center coordinator called Marissa to offer her an opportunity. They required someone to assist with their lunch program, which entailed setting up tables and serving food 3 days each week. It was a legitimate paid position, not just a stipend, albeit still part-time. Grandmother reluctantly accepted the position, pretending as if she were doing them a favor. But Marissa later informed us she was one of their most dependable employees. She arrived early, remained late to assist with cleaning, and even began remembering the regular participants' names and dietary preferences. Marissa stated that in her 20 years of social work, this was some of the best improvement she has seen in a similar case. 6 months passed with Granny sticking to her regimen at the senior residence. She awoke at 7 a.m. every day to walk to the senior center for breakfast duties. She offered eggs and toast to the other residents 3 times a week. The organizer paid her every 2 weeks, and she spent the money on groceries and bus travel. She never apologized for calling me a disgrace when I was born. She never apologized for putting money before family, but she also stopped showing up at our home unexpectedly. She stopped contacting Dad's work phone during his shift. She stopped telling strangers sad stories about her ungrateful kids. Once the drama had subsided, Mom and Dad jumped back into the after-school program. They spent their weekends preparing the expansion they had been dreaming about for years. Colin remembered our tale and helped them apply for a community development award. They took 3 weeks to finish the application, which included all of the requisite papers and references. The award of $40,000 was approved 2 months later. They discovered an ideal spot on the north side of town, where no programs existed. Dad worked every weekend that summer refurbishing the facility with volunteer assistance. Mom interviewed and hired 2 more employees to assist with the increased enrollment. By September, 75 students had shown up at all 3 venues. Parents began describing it as the nicest thing that had ever happened to their area. The local news broadcast a piece in which children learned to change oil and solve algebra problems simultaneously. During my senior year, I concentrated on college applications, while everything else steadied. My grades were strong enough that several colleges expressed interest. The guidance counselor assisted me in applying for all available scholarships. In March, State University sent me an acceptance letter with a partial scholarship paying half of my tuition. Mom cried when she read it, and Dad grabbed me up and whirled me around the kitchen. 2 days later, a card addressed to me arrived without a return address. Inside there was a $5 bill and a note in wobbly handwriting expressing her pride. Dad laughed when he saw it, saying it was probably the first money she'd given someone in years. Mom carefully placed the card in my memory box. Anyway, Uncle called the following week with news that caused everyone to stop what they were doing. Clara was pregnant and due in the fall. They'd been trying for 2 years and were almost giving up hope. During the call, Uncle made it plain that grandmother's visits would be supervised only. No babysitting, no alone time with the infant, and no popping up unexpectedly. When they told grandmother at the senior center, she simply nodded without objecting. She realized she had little leverage to demand anything more. My graduation day came sooner than anyone imagined. The event took place in the high school football stadium on a beautiful June morning. Mom insisted on inviting the grandma, even though Dad believed it was unnecessary. She arrived 30 minutes early and secured a seat in the back row. She wore the same dress to every family occasion for the previous 6 months. When they announced my name, I noticed her sitting calmly. She did not cheer or wave like the other grandparents. She just watched, and then went without trying to attend our celebration supper. Mom later said that it was perhaps the best ending we could have hoped for. 2 weeks after graduation, the after-school program received a Community Excellence Award. The mayor presented the trophy during the ceremony, which took place at City Hall. Dad had to give a speech on their travels and the program's significance to the town. He thanked everyone who has helped them through difficult times without specifying any names. I sat in the third row, watching him scan the audience. His gaze rested on grandmother, who was sitting in the rear in her customary location. Something shifted in his expression, and for the first time, I saw tranquility. He continued his speech by discussing how family may take numerous forms. The audience gave him a 3-minute standing ovation. Grandmother snuck out during the ovation, but not before I saw her wipe her eyes. She continued to live in her senior apartment while receiving benefits and working part-time. She attended holiday dinners when invited, but usually left before dessert. She visited Uncle's house once a month to see the baby, with Clara supervising every moment. She never held the infant without another person's hands nearby. She never complained about the constraints or attempted to push them. She wasn't the caring grandmother that children fantasize about. She wasn't even really pleasant most of the time. However, she was not the same destructive storm she had been previously. August arrived, and I began packing for college. My room looked weird, with half of my belongings in boxes and bags. That evening, we decided to swim in the pool one final time before I went. The water was wonderful, and the sunset turned everything golden. Dad floated on his back and stated that his mother was doing well at the senior center. Mom and I simply nodded, knowing that this untidy solution was the best we could get. Well, that's going to wrap it up for me today. It makes you stop and think about things, doesn't it? I appreciate you hanging out with me and walking through it all. At dinner, Mom boasted about my sister's 4-bedroom mansion, so I finally spoke. I make more than both of them combined. Silence fell. What followed was an ear-splitting stillness. Halfway to her mouth, my mom's fork halted. Perched dangerously on the tines was a slice of grilled salmon. My stepfather Richard finally looked up from his phone, and my sister Amelia's wine glass lingered on her lips. It was the first time he had done so all evening. It took me 3 years to finally say it. Over the course of 3 years, I endured subtle insults, passive-aggressive comments, and the stigma of being the family disappointment. Now I was having my moment, sitting at this pricey cafe that Mom had picked out because it was near Amelia's new house. I must digress, however, for the story does not begin with supper. I was 13 years old and Amelia was 15 when the pattern started. It wasn't until I was 33 years old that I was able to finally overcome it. Amelia had the best childhood ever. She possessed an air of natural charisma that grown-ups couldn't help but admire. She was 2 years older, athletically gifted, and academically gifted. I was the introvert who preferred to stay home and read than mingle with my friends. The relationship between my parents further worsened once my mother remarried Martin 2 years after our divorce, which occurred when I was 9 years old. From his first marriage, Martin inherited a daughter, but she and her mother lived in a different nation. His surrogate daughter, Amelia, became someone he could like and be proud of in no time. Well, I basically vanished into thin air. A full scholarship allowed Amelia to attend college. To help cover the costs of my community college education, I worked part-time in a bookshop. After finishing college, Amelia landed a well-paying marketing position. While I sought to define my life's purpose, I labored through a number of administrative and retail jobs. Daniel, Amelia's college sweetheart, was married in a grandiose ceremony that was mostly covered by Mom and Martin. Family dinner chats suggested that I was still single and focused on my profession, which they took as a sign that I couldn't maintain a relationship. The problem is, I wasn't having quite as much trouble as they anticipated. I was stealthily constructing my own life while Amelia had the idyllic existence everyone had imagined. I'd always had an innate talent for math and a firm grasp of how the financial markets worked. Before transitioning into financial consulting, I worked as a freelance bookkeeper for local companies. Even though I was making a respectable living, I chose to live frugally and not flaunt my prosperity. In the meanwhile, Amelia's picture-perfect life began to crumble. Daniel was more happy with his middle management job and weekend golf games than she had anticipated. He lacked ambition. Their marriage devolved into a string of pricey acquisitions and passive-aggressive social media posts meant to portray an unauthentic joy. To Mom and Martin, though, it was all irrelevant. The one with the spouse, the beautiful home, And the Instagram-worthy life was still Amelia, the successful one. At family reunions, they still had to find an excuse to explain myself because I was the one who let them down. 3 years ago, things finally broke down. Ethan, an amazing architect, and I had been in a committed relationship for the first time in years. I was truly happy after 9 months of being with him. At last, I hoped I'd have something that would change my family's perception of me. I took Ethan to celebrate Amelia's birthday with her. It was a major event. Everyone from her inner circle as well as our extended relatives showed up because she reserved a private room at a fancy restaurant. Despite my nerves, I couldn't wait to meet everyone and introduce Ethan. It was evident that Amelia had her sights set on him within the hour. She spoke over him, had him laugh a little too much, and used his arm as an excuse to make her point. I tried to jump in on their chat, but she always managed to change the subject to something I didn't understand, or bring up memories that only Daniel and I had. The most upsetting part was seeing the expression of joy on Ethan's face whenever she spoke to him. He would inevitably be captivated by Amelia's irresistible charm. She had always had that kind of charisma. She was chatting about an architecture project that her marketing agency was working on, and by the end of the night, he had exchanged business cards with her. After a fortnight, Ethan ended our relationship. He told me we wouldn't be a good fit in the long run, despite his admiration for my character, and that he couldn't see us being together. Some 3 months later, I came across pictures on Amelia's Instagram where she and Daniel were seated at a dining table with Ethan and his new fiancée. From what I can tell, that business link was the catalyst for their friendship. It was irrelevant that I was never told whether Amelia and Ethan had an illicit relationship. The fact that Amelia had appropriated something from me, and turned it into something about her, was what was important. My loved ones pretended like nothing had happened again. I got down to brass tacks then. I had had enough of attempting to get their respect or approval. Creating the life I want would take precedence, and I would not let anyone in on the secret if they failed to recognize my value. With renewed vigor, I dove headfirst into my task. I went into business for myself as a financial consultant, specializing in helping small and medium-sized companies, SMEs, that larger companies disregarded. For some reason I excelled at it. Helping business owners maximize earnings while reducing risks was my specialty, and I had a gift for identifying opportunities that others missed. I was generating more money in a year than I ever imagined imaginable. I out-earned Amelia and Daniel put together in just over 2 years. Just across town, I purchased a stunning home in a hip neighborhood. A renovated Craftsman from the 1930s with original hardwood flooring, a beautiful garden, and enough character to make design magazines green with envy, not a McMansion like Amelia's. Oh, and I also crossed paths with Samuel. Samuel again, but this one is very different from my stepfather. A pediatric surgeon, he had gentle eyes and a sharp wit. Pretending or making an impression on anyone was something he couldn't care less about. In his spare time, he volunteered at a clinic for low-income families while working long hours at the children's hospital. 6 months after we moved in together, he proposed. Our relationship lasted a year. The proposal was understated. On a peaceful Sunday morning, as we sipped our coffee in the garden and perused the newspaper, he asked me. It was a basic ring, yet it was gorgeous. After I confirmed his proposal, he kissed me passionately, like if I were his most prized possession. I was hesitant to immediately inform my family about our engagement. I was relishing in the joy, shielding it from their boundless criticism and lack of excitement. It was clear to Samuel. Protecting positive things from harmful family dynamics was second nature to him because of his upbringing by a narcissistic mother. Rather, I let my mind wander to the future I envisioned for myself. My husband Samuel and I chose to have a modest, close-knit wedding with only our closest friends and the relatives who were there to celebrate with us. An old inn with gardens that looked out over the lake was the perfect location we found. We worked with a florist, a photographer, and a caterer that focused on serving food straight from the farm. We also planned to host a housewarming party to celebrate the occasion. We didn't want to brag because we had worked so hard to create this lovely place, and wanted to share it with those important to us. Our closest friends, Samuel's hospital co-workers, some of my business clients who became friends, and, most importantly, Samuel's family, wonderful people who welcomed me with open arms, were all invited. Not inviting Amelia, Richard or my mom was an intentional decision on my part. There was no animosity behind it. The primary motivation was safeguarding my happiness, while vengeance played a little role. They had spent decades lowering my self-esteem and making me feel unimportant. That kind of vibe wasn't going to be welcome in my lovely new house. A mystical celebration was held. On the back patio, we arranged tables and placed lights throughout the yard. I had a fantastic spread of food prepared with the help of Samuel's chef sister-in-law. Guests greeted our home with laughter and mingling. The parents of Samuel rounded me out to express their gratitude for the impact I had on their son. In her toast, my best friend Leah expressed her admiration for the life I had created. There were so many kind, supportive people there, and the atmosphere was perfect for a housewarming party. Seeing all those joyful faces brought a feeling of kinship that I had never had with my own family before. Eventually my mom found out, of course. Everyone knew each other in this little town, and there were even some friends who didn't know about the family conflict who posted about it online. Mom gave me a call around 1 month following the celebration. I could hear the hurt and uncertainty beneath her bland tone as she said, "Leah, I heard you had some kind of party at your house." "Yes," I responded plainly. "A housewarming party." "Oh." This was followed by a lengthy silence. "That sounds nice. I wish I'd known about it." "It was lovely," I responded, avoiding the underhandedness. "Here we go again. Well, maybe next time you could let us know. We would have loved to see your new place." My response was a simple, maybe, even though I and my companion were well aware that there would be no another opportunity. Until then, that was about all. Mom would mention wanting to see the house every once in a while, and I would respond with vagueness. Taking a different tack, Amelia asked me pointed questions about my new life and proposed that we all meet together for dinner soon. My deflection was courteous, but forceful. At the same time, my real life was going swimmingly. The expansion of my company was outpacing my ability to manage it. Samuel and I tied the knot in a beautiful little ceremony. There were members of his family, my best friend Leah, a handful of close friends, and a celebrant who had known Samuel from his youth. While on our honeymoon in Italy, we slept in quaint towns, indulged in delicious cuisine, and felt our love deepen with each passing day. Everyone, including ourselves, was amazed by how easily we adjusted to married life upon our return. I would consult with clients and grow my business from the comfort of my home office, while Samuel would wake up early to make rounds at the hospital. Every night after work, we'd get in the kitchen and catch up on each other's days. On weekends, we would tend to the garden, try out local eateries, or host friends for informal dinners. It was a life of peace and contentment. Additionally, I experienced an unprecedented sense of tranquility. However, my family couldn't stand the quiet for very long, as I was about to discover. A Tuesday afternoon was the time of the phone call. My phone rang as I was going over a new client's financial statements. I didn't want to let it go to voicemail when I saw Mom's name on the screen, so I answered. My mom's voice seemed noticeably louder than normal when she said, "Leah, honey, I have some exciting news." I was suddenly on high alert. "Oh, Amelia and Daniel bought a new house. It's absolutely gorgeous. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a gourmet kitchen, and a 3-car garage. It's in that new development on the north side of town, you know, where all the young professionals are moving." As she went into depth about the house, I made the right noises to indicate that I was listening. The description sounded just like the kind of mansion Amelia would pick. Grand, pricey, and built to impress rather than to accommodate everyday life. "Next month she's organizing a housewarming celebration," Mom went on to say. "The whole family's invited, of course. I'm so excited to see everyone together. It's been too long since we've all been in the same place." It wasn't subtle that the emphasis was on all. This was Mom's method of making sure I knew I was to be the responsible, encouraging younger sister. "That sounds pleasant," I remarked. "You'll come, won't you? Amelia specifically asked me to make sure you'd be there. She's so excited to show off the house." Without a doubt, she was. As the less accomplished sibling whose presence accentuated Amelia's achievements, I had always provided the ideal audience for her successes. "I'll have to check my schedule," I informed myself. "Oh, come on, Nora. It's family, whatever you have going on can wait." I was on the verge of laughing at how casually they disregarded my time and obligations. Even though my job was much more profitable than Amelia's, Mom still considered it a hobby that I could put aside whenever my family needed me. A resolute, "I will inform you," came out of my lips. "Well, don't wait too long. Amelia needs a head count for catering." Long after the call ended, I remained seated in my office, gazing out onto the landscape that Samuel and I had collaborated on. A part of me considered just turning down the invitation and staying home. Still, I couldn't help but be intrigued. I was curious to see the house that had necessitated such a show. I was curious to witness whether Amelia and Daniel were truly happy or just acting it out. Perhaps I was curious to see how my loved ones would respond to the changed me. That evening, upon returning home from the hospital, Samuel discovered me standing there. His words, "You look thoughtful," were accompanied by a kiss on my head. He was informed about the invitation and the phone call by me. As usual, he listened without passing judgment. He then asked, "Do you want to go?" once I had finished. I'm not sure. Part of me thinks it would be masochistic, but part of me is curious about the house, about whether they've changed at all, about whether they can see who I am now, or if they'll still treat me like the disappointing little sister who can't get her life together. For an instant, Samuel remained silent. You know that their opinion of you doesn't change who you are, right? You've built an amazing life. You're successful, you're happy, you're loved. Whether they can see that or not is their problem, not yours. Saying, "I know," I continued, "but I spent so many years trying to earn their approval. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever be completely free of that. Maybe going would help you find out." Obviously, he was correct. The day after that, I contacted Mom to let her know that Samuel and I would be going. Everything about the housewarming party met my expectations. The mansion was massive and clinical, furnished with pricey pieces that gave the impression of having been hand-picked by an interior designer rather than a loving family. Roughly 50 individuals showed up, and I didn't recognize the majority of them. Amelia extended an invitation to her co-workers, gym buddies, book club members, and a number of strangers who lived in her neighborhood. It was less of a party and more of a networking gathering. As usual, Amelia appeared stunning. She looked stunning in a designer gown that would have put most people's mortgage payments in the red, and her hair and cosmetics were also impeccable. Still, her smile was fragile, and her flitting from group to group to make sure everyone was gawking at her stunning house spoke of desperation. Daniel was regaling the crowd by the bar with tales of his college football heyday, just like he had done for years. He looked weak and defeated, and I couldn't help but feel sorry for him because of his weight increase and hair loss. Playing the role of the jubilant parents and bragging about their daughter's achievements to anyone who would listen, was Richard and Mom, at their most comfortable. Without ever stating my name or occupation, they introduced Samuel and me to a handful of individuals as Amelia's sister and her husband. Samuel felt my hand tighten as soon as he realized. A soft whisper of, "How are you doing?" came from him. More pleasant than I had anticipated, I thought to myself. Rather of being upset, I felt disconnected while seeing this performance. I no longer cared about the characters in this story, and these individuals were complete strangers to me. I hated the house tour. As she guided groups of guests through the house, Amelia pointed out the pricey furnishings and elaborate details. The walk-in closet in the master bedroom was larger than the one in my previous apartment. The kitchen was equipped with all new, high-quality appliances. The 12-person table in the formal dining room seemed uninviting and chilly. We were briefly alone in the kitchen, and Amelia asked, "What do you think?" afterwards. "I must say, it's truly remarkable," I remarked in actuality. "I realize it's bigger than what you're used to," she continued, flashing that usual condescending smile. "But Daniel and I are planning for the future. We want to have kids, and we want them to have space to grow." It was obvious, my house was too cramped and unfit for somebody with lofty goals. That remark would have hurt more 3 years ago. Now all I could do was feel bad for her. She seemed taken aback by my tone, as she studied me intently as I said, "It's beautiful, Amelia. I hope you'll be very happy here," saying, "You seem different," she continued. "Do I?" More confident. "I guess it suits you." It was a compliment she'd never really offered me before, and I was truly moved. "I am grateful," I murmured. "I'm happy." She said, "Good." And for an instant it appeared as though she truly meant it. As for the remainder of the gathering, nothing went wrong. Even my parents, who were clearly amazed by Samuel's achievements and his evident dedication to me, were captivated by him. We departed early the following day, stating that he had an early procedure. As we made our way home, Samuel inquired, "Was it precisely what you were hoping for? Expensive, impressive, and devoid of any genuine character? And what are your thoughts on that?" I reflected on it, feeling a sense of relief. That life, the mansion, the ideal marriage, the acceptance of one's family, was something I used to aspire to. Despite the admiration it would receive from my family, I knew it would only bring me misery after viewing it in person. Particularly at that moment, because it would imply that I had to change into someone else to get something that ought to have been offered to me for free. Quietness enveloped us as we continued our journey home. Gratitude washed over me as I gazed at our house. Beautiful, humble, character-filled, as we pulled into our driveway. Home was here. That was sufficient. This was the pinnacle. For some reason, I assumed that was going to be all. By witnessing Amelia's new existence, I was able to affirm my desire for none of it and demonstrate to myself that I had progressed beyond relying on my family's approval. Everything is resolved. However, it is not easy for families, particularly dysfunctional ones, to let go. The remarks began a few weeks subsequent to the celebration. In her inoffensive phone calls, Mom would drop hints about Amelia's impending house decorating or Daniel's plans to get a boat to complement his 3-car garage. Samuel and I were asked when we were planned to upgrade, and there were subtle jabs about my modest abode. Amelia began sharing more photos and videos on social media, chronicling her splurges and DIY endeavors. A redesign of the picture-perfect kitchen, new furnishings, and expert landscaping. Their ever-increasingly lavish and, to be honest, unaffordable lifestyle was on full display in every post. The source of the funds began to elude me. Although Amelia's marketing earnings were respectable, they were insufficient to cover such extravagant expenditure. Although not particularly remarkable, Daniel's pay was adequate. They appeared to be adding costs to their budget on a weekly basis, and the house alone must have put a strain on their budget. When Samuel and I encountered Daniel at the supermarket on a Saturday morning, it validated my concerns. He seemed anxious and exhausted. A strained smile spread across Daniel's face as Samuel spoke of the lovely new home. "Oh, it's fantastic," he exclaimed. "A little more than we bargained for financially speaking, but Amelia has her heart set on making it perfect." "These things have a way of working out," Samuel replied with an air of tact. "I hope so," he said. "Between us, the mortgage payments are significant. I'm considering taking a weekend job and picking up extra shifts at work." I felt a twinge of sorrow for him. I could tell that the pressure was taking a toll on Daniel, who wasn't exactly the most driven person on the planet, but was basically good at heart. "If you ever need any financial advice, I do consulting work. I might be able to help you figure out a budget that works," I remarked. A look of true appreciation spread across Daniel's face. I gave him my number and urged him to call me if he wanted to talk. He said, "Really? That would be amazing. Amelia keeps saying, we just need to make more money, but I think we might need to spend less instead." And so we exchanged numbers. Samuel shook his head as we drove home. "You realize Amelia's going to hate that, right? Her little sister helping her husband with money problems." "Probably," I responded. "But Daniel seems like he's drowning, and I can't just watch that happen. Even after everything, Daniel never did anything to me. His only crime was marrying my sister." He chuckled. "You're a better person than I am. I'd probably let him sink just to spite her." "No, you wouldn't. You would do what I'm doing because it's the right thing to do." He extended his hand and squeezed mine briefly. Daniel never contacted, saying, "This is why I love you." It didn't totally shock me. Either he independently decided against it, or Amelia discovered our communication and ended it. In any case, it was likely for the best. Financial counseling was just the latest drama in my already troubled extended family. The spending, however, and the social media posts detailing it, persisted. I couldn't tell who Amelia was competing with, but it seemed like she was. The posts started coming more often and with increasing detail. Videos showing her exercising in their new home gym, images of pricey meals and weekend retreats, and expertly set rooms. The situation reached a peak 6 months later when Mom called with news that was expected but nevertheless caught everyone off guard. "Nora, I need to tell you something, and I don't want you to hear it from someone else." I felt sick. This is how most talks begin, and trust me, they seldom end well. "What's wrong?" "Amelia and Daniel are getting divorced." My workplace chair gave apart under my weight. "What happened?" "I don't know all the details. Amelia says they grew apart, wanted different things. Daniel apparently wasn't supportive of her ambitions. That was Amelia's version anyway. I wonder what Daniel's side of the story would be." Saying, "I'm sorry to hear that," was my sincere intention. No matter how much I disliked Amelia, I never intended for her to be unhappy. "She's definitely struggling," Mom went on to say. "The house is too expensive for her to manage on her own, and Daniel's being difficult about the divorce settlement. She might have to sell." That was it. What the call was actually about. Saying, "That's tough," I began. "I was hoping, well, I know you're doing well financially now. Maybe you could help her out, just temporarily, until she gets back on her feet." I was taken aback by its audacity. They wanted me to help Amelia get out of the financial jam she got herself into after years of treating me like a failure, ignoring my achievements, and excluding me from family gatherings. "Mom, I know it's a lot to ask. But she's your sister, Nora. Family helps family. Close relatives support one another. When Amelia breezed through community college and I struggled, where was that philosophy? Where was it when I was getting patronizing comments about my decisions in life while working retail jobs? In all the 30 years that I had spent attempting to gain acceptance into this family, where had it gone? I said, "I'll think about it," since I was not prepared to argue with her over the phone. "Thank you, sweetheart. I knew you'd understand. Amelia will be so relieved." I remained in my office for quite some time after the call ended, gazing at the financial documents scattered around my desk. I was excelling, above and beyond. There would be no noticeable effect on my finances if I helped Amelia. I wasn't asked if I could lend a hand, the question was, if I ought to. When Samuel returned home, he discovered me there, my gaze fixed on the papers. He then inquired, "Bad day?" He was informed about the phone call by me. I could feel his jaw clenching as I spoke, yet his attentive listening was unwavering. "Now that I've finished, I need to clarify this," he continued. "Your sister spent herself into debt trying to maintain a lifestyle she couldn't afford, is getting divorced partly because of the financial stress she created, and now your mother wants you to pay for her mistakes. That's about the size of it. And what did your mother say about all the times you could have used help? All the times Amelia got support that you didn't?" "Nothing, because that's different apparently." "Nora, you know I'll support whatever decision you make," Samuel said, taking a seat opposite from me. "But I have to ask. What do you think would happen if you said no?" "They'd be angry, disappointed. They'd probably stop speaking to me altogether. And would that be a loss?" The question was reasonable. In what ways might I be penalized? Infrequent phone conversations in which I was made to feel inferior. I received invitations to events where my presence was utterly neglected. Being a scapegoat for one's family is a luxury. "I am unsure," I admitted truthfully. "Part of me thinks it would be a relief, but they're still my family." Being related to someone doesn't give them the right to treat you badly, and it doesn't obligate you to enable their poor decisions. Obviously he was correct, but it's one thing to know something intellectually, and quite another to experience it emotionally. I mulled over the choice for several days afterward. My best friend Leah, who is always honest, was the one I spoke to. She asked, "Are you insane?" in response to my explanation of Mom's request. "These people have treated you like garbage for decades, and now they want you to pay for the privilege. Tell them to pound sand." Still, I couldn't help but reflect on Daniel, who appeared so frazzled and anxious while we were in the grocery store. Even though it was difficult, I couldn't help but feel bad for Amelia. No one is immune to the emotional toll that a divorce may take, even the ones who cause it. Ultimately, I gained clarity after speaking with Claire, Samuel's sister. Claire had a gift for sifting through people's feelings and getting to the core of issues. She was a family dynamics specialist therapist. "The question isn't whether you can afford to help," she stated one night over dinner. "The question is whether helping would actually be helpful." "What do you mean?" "If you bail Amelia out, what does she learn? That her choices don't have consequences? That she can always count on other people to fix her problems? Is that really helping her? Or is it just enabling her to continue making poor decisions? But if I don't help, she could lose her house. She could lose the house she bought with money she didn't have to impress people she doesn't even like. Would that really be the worst thing in the world?" Claire had a point. Assisting Amelia in evading the repercussions of her decisions would not impart any wisdom or influence her conduct. Putting it off would just make things worse when the time came for reckoning. A day later, I contacted Mom to inform her that I would not be providing Amelia with any funds. Intimacy, wrath, charges of self-centeredness, and betrayal were the typical responses. My mother sobbed as she expressed her disappointment in me. On the phone, Richard gave me a lecture about my responsibilities to my family. Even worse than before, Amelia herself called later in the week, and our chat was... Her voice was heavy with emotion as she cried out, "I can't believe you would leave me in this state. I'm your sister, Nora. How can you watch me lose everything and not care?" "I do care," I informed you. "But giving you money won't solve the real problem." "What real problem?" "The problem is that you're living beyond your means and have been for years. Giving you money now would just enable you to keep making the same mistakes." "So you're going to let me lose my house to teach me a lesson? What kind of person does that?" She abruptly ended our conversation, describing herself as the kind of person who's learned that sometimes love means saying no. What followed was a challenging few months. Unfortunately, Amelia did not win the house. Daniel would not continue making mortgage payments for a home he did not occupy, and she was unable to do so on her own. She had to sell most of her pricey furnishings since it wouldn't fit into her new, smaller apartment across town. Richard and Mom were upset with me. They cut me out of all future family get-togethers and made it plain that they blamed me for Amelia's problems. I didn't miss the irony. They had always rewarded me and Amelia for doing what was right for myself, and now I was being penalized for it. As the months went by though, an unforeseen event occurred. Amelia began to appear lighter without the burden of upholding her lavish lifestyle. Her posts on social media started to be less frequent but more authentic. She shared photos of herself reading, going for walks, and preparing meals in her tiny apartment kitchen rather than boasting about her luxury items. She switched to a smaller company that allowed her more flexibility in her schedule and lower pay. She began treatment in an effort to manage the emotional and financial fallout of her divorce. Max, an unkempt little mongrel she got from a shelter, was in nearly every photo she shared, and he always seemed so happy to be alive. I unexpectedly crossed paths with her at the downtown farmers market 6 months after the divorce was finalized. For the first time in years, she appeared truly delighted as she bought vegetables. "Nora," she murmured, her voice betraying just astonishment rather than wrath. "Hey Amelia, how are you doing?" She pointed to her basket overflowing with fresh fruit and vegetables and said, "Good, actually. Really good. I'm learning to cook. Turns out it's kind of therapeutic." "That's great. You look peaceful." Laughter escaped her lips. "That's not a word anyone's ever used to describe me before, but yeah, I think I am. Losing the house was awful at the time, but it forced me to figure out what I actually wanted instead of what I thought I was supposed to want." "And what do you want?" "Simplicity. I think a life that fits me instead of one that looks good from the outside." We continued our conversation for a short while longer, and it was the most sincere exchange we had experienced in a long time. They hugged as we said our goodbyes. "I was really furious with you for not helping me," she admitted. "While there wasn't an outright apology, I was surprised to receive more of an acknowledgement. But I think you were right. I needed to figure this out on my own." Mom called again 3 weeks ago with an invitation. "I'm taking Amelia out for her birthday dinner," she informed me. We both realized it was an olive branch when she said, "Just a small celebration at that new place downtown. Would you like to join us?" Now that the crisis had passed and I had been right to not enable Amelia's bad choices, Mom was prepared to welcome me back into the family. "I will give it some thought," I replied. "Please do. It would mean a lot to Amelia and to me." Ultimately, I made the decision to go. I wasn't so much looking forward to getting back into the family dynamic as I was intrigued to see how things had changed and, perhaps to see if I could sit at that table and still maintain the boundaries I'd put so much effort into establishing. Last night while enjoying a meal at that pricey cafe, Mom gushed over Amelia's housewarming celebration from the previous year. "Your sister's housewarming party was absolutely delightful," Mom gushed as she sliced her fish. "When are you going to catch up?" I felt smacked in the face by the question. Mom just had to poke fun at me, even though we were supposed to be celebrating Amelia's birthday and a new chapter in her life. Despite all that had transpired, even after Amelia had admitted that her previous lifestyle couldn't continue, Mom continued to hold it up as an example for me to follow. At that moment, it hit me. Absolutely nothing had changed. Even if Mom would welcome me back to the table, I'll always be her failing daughter who couldn't keep up with her accomplished sister. It made little difference that Amelia's prosperity had been based on debt and delusion. Nobody paid attention to the fact that my life had become really solid and fulfilling. I realized I had finished apologizing when I looked at her sitting there with her fork raised, waiting for me to explain my smaller house, quieter life, and different choices. "Last year, I hosted mine," I declared in a composed manner. "Because you weren't invited." Her fork froze in midair. There was a great stillness afterward. The wine glass meant for Amelia's lips came to a halt. Incredulous, Richard raised his head from his phone. It seemed like everyone in the restaurant could feel that something major had transpired. Many emotions passed across Mom's face, including perplexion, pain, wrath, and finally a wounded dignity. At long last, she spoke up. "I don't understand. I bought a house 2 years ago. Samuel and I had a housewarming party last year. It was lovely. About 40 people, all of whom actually care about us. You weren't invited because you've spent the last 30 years making it clear that you don't care about my life unless it reflects well on you." "Nora," Amelia whispered softly. "Maybe we should—" "No," I replied, maintaining my gaze fixed on Mom. "I'm tired of pretending this is a normal family dynamic. I'm tired of being treated like a consolation prize and then expected to be grateful for scraps of attention. A tear or two formed in Mom's eye. How can you say that? You're my daughter. I love you. Do you? Because love isn't just a feeling, Mom. It's actions. It's showing up. It's being proud of someone for who they are, not disappointed in them for who they're not. She mentioned, I am proud of you, but her voice didn't carry any significance. When have you ever been proud of me? When I graduated from college working 2 jobs, when I started my own business, when I got married to a wonderful man who loves me? Because I don't remember any celebrations for those things. The tears were freely flowing at this point. I didn't know you felt this way. That's because you never asked. You were too busy comparing me to Amelia and finding me lacking. Amelia, who was fixed on her plate, seemed to be going along with it since being the favorite made her feel special. I glanced across at her. When Amelia raised her eyes to gaze at me, I thought I saw shame. Nora, I refuse to hold you responsible for that, I went on to say. We were kids, and kids take love wherever they can get it. But we're adults now, and I'm done playing this game. Getting to my feet, I placed my napkin on the tabletop. I have a beautiful house with a husband who adores me, a successful business that I built myself. I have friends who value me, and a life that makes me happy. I don't need to catch up to anyone, because I'm not in a race. I withdrew the necessary funds from my wallet to pay for my supper plus a substantial gratuity. Saying, Happy birthday, Amelia, I continued. I genuinely hope you find what you're looking for. After that, I left.